Good afternoon. Welcome to City Council meeting for September 27th, 2022. Items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. Two or more agenda items for consideration may be combined, and any item on the agenda may be removed or related discussion may be delayed at any time. With that, I will call the meeting to order. Madam City Clerk, could we have a confirmation of the agenda posting and the roll call?
Yes, thank you. The agenda was posted in accordance with open meeting law, and all council members are present.
Thank you. And we will begin with the invocation. We have Pastor Philip Washington here. Please rise if able.
Gracious Father God, we thank you for the opportunity to stand again. We pray, God, that the business that is at hand will be dealt with in wisdom and great knowledge and good understanding. We pray, God, that the care of the people will always be the concerning heart, and that you would touch each and every mind to give them strength and poise and great wisdom. And for this, God, we give you honor, glory, and all the praise for your majestic name, and we thank you in the name of our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Washington. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you again, Pastor Washington. Madam City Clerk, were there any public announcements?
No public announcements.
Well, I have two. One, congratulations to the Las Vegas Aces, WNBA champions this year. And the second, happy birthday, Madam City Clerk. All right, we will move to our initial public comment period. Comments during this period of time may be on any item on the agenda for action. Speakers will have up to 5 minutes. We will take comment from those that are present, and then also comments from anyone wishing to call in or who may have emailed in prior to the meeting. As always, we do ask for people to be civil and concise. Is there anyone present that would like to speak in public comment? Yes, please come forward and state your name.
Good evening. I'm Cynthia Swanson, Cindy Swanson. I live at 535 Birch Street. And I am here to kind of make reference to item number 17 on your agenda. And it is with much thanks that our city manager has looked into these things and the staff has reported on it. As a beneficiary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I'd like to address a couple of thoughts with you folks. One of them is just kind of trying to get to common ground with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It came about after decades of advocacy, sit-ins, protests, and we finally have one of the most far-reaching civil rights programs that we have, and that is the Americans with Disabilities Act for people with disabilities. Every several years, it does become reauthorized. As with all good legislation, we need to look at it, look what we've missed, look what's changed, and what has to happen again. When the ADA was first initiated, it was the result of good advocacy from folks who used wheelchairs. So that's when we had the curb cuts, and the curb cuts played havoc with people who are blind because the curbs would let us go right down because our canes wouldn't find those cuts. So now we have truncated domes. That's a result of the reauthorization, constantly re-examining it. As time has gone on, we have realized that there are people that have disabilities other than those folks in wheelchairs, blind, deaf, people who have intellectual developmental disabilities such as Down syndrome, autism, those sorts of things. So those are all the kinds of things that the ADA has to constantly keep watching at. And as an aside, when my son was 3 with Down syndrome, we were told he would never read or have a range of emotions, and we knew that they were wrong when he read the newspaper and read that the Chicago Cubs lost, and he threw a fit. So we have both of those off the ground. The Americans with Disabilities Act is far-reaching. It doesn't just talk about public buildings and ramps. It discusses things like recreation. Is our rec center accessible? Can I get on a piece of equipment at the rec center? It talks about digital access. Can I access your website easily? It's all those kinds of things, and that's why it keeps getting reauthorized over and over again. We don't have to go real far to find violations of the ADA. The ADA specifies in the Department of Justice, and I'm a social worker, I don't practice law, but the Department of Justice has consistently said compliance is one thing. It's the minimum requirement that the ADA sets out as guidelines. What's really important is access. So while we might have met the letter of the law, if I can't access it, if a deaf, blind person with an intellectual disability can't access it by different varying kinds of accessibility that we might provide, it's not going to work. It's going to be found on, in violation. So we don't have to go really far for this, because we walk around the streets, and as a blind person, I walk into a lot of encroachments and that sort of thing. And to highlight that, my husband, an ace photographer, has taken some pictures. So Art has some pictures to share with you, and we can start talking about enforcement. Thank you. Your turn. Hershey? Yeah.
I'm Arthur Swanson. I'm married to Cindy. I'm going to go through some slides, and I took these pictures myself just as part of my daily life walking around in beautiful Boulder City. At no time did I go out to try to get a gotcha picture, but this is just for me walking the dog or going around town, going to some of the many festivals that we have. So I have two categories. One is crosswalk and sidewalk, and the other one is parking. So there are many encroachments, and you can see here real estate signs, construction signs, motorized vehicles, garbage cans, again, more construction signs, and then the photo on the lower left was from Broadbent Park, the sidewalk for the July 4th celebration of 2021. And this is really ironic because, of course, July 4th is Independence Day, and those products on the sidewalk would certainly limit the independence of someone who has a disability and needs to use a walker or cane or dog or wheelchair. This picture here, the truck on the left, certainly that lift gate's about 5 feet off the ground and presents an enormous danger to someone who is blind or someone using a wheelchair is forced to go out into the street to get around that truck. And again, none of these issues here, I'm sure that no one who did this got up that morning and said, I'm going to make life tough on a person with a disability today. But again, just as I took these pictures in my daily existence, these issues happened because people weren't familiar with how they were going to create a hardship. Pretty much all of those pictures, that goes without saying, the sidewalk shouldn't be blocked. Deterioration of the sidewalk in the lower left, debris, naturally occurring things like there was a heavy rainstorm, so a lot of debris, sticks, rocks, and then there's a construction project in the upper left there where the contractor drove over the retaining wall and broke it, but didn't clean it up and just left it on the sidewalk. Parking, in this case, here's two accessible parking places, and both are blocked by the materials that are used for the respective retailers. The cross hatches, those are intended to be used specifically by vans that have the ramps for wheelchairs. They're not they're not additional parking places, so that's really out of bounds there. This is right outside of City Hall here, and I caught this because this is often used as a staging area for equipment, city trucks, or there was a contractor there. And so really that should, if it's necessary to have a staging area, it should be someplace that doesn't double as the accessible parking. Accessible parking should be for accessible parking, and the staging area should be somewhere else. So with that, my slides are done. I thank you, and I'm going to just turn it back to Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you once again. And as you can tell, some of this is a matter of enforcement. That's pretty obvious to note. When the movement to get more accessibility legislation occurred in 1990, The movement was called the Independent Living Movement, Nothing About Me Without Me. And all of you are really good people. I thank you all for your service, but you're not living the life of a person with a disability. Someday you might. But in the meantime, I would implore you to follow some of the trends that Bend, Oregon, Reno, Nevada, Naperville, Illinois have a citizens advisory group of some sort. I don't care what it would be called, commission group, workshop, whatever, that would advise on certain things. Because sometimes if you're not using that assistance, you're not going to get it. Like a round doorknob could cause a lot of discomfort for somebody who's got arthritis. So we need the sling down, the push down the lever. So again, I would ask us to consider that. And again, it doesn't come under one department because it's all over. It's recreation, it's police. How do the police respond to my child? How do the police respond to a deaf person? It's global. It's a global kind of a thing. So with that in mind, I thank you all for your service, and I thank you for listening to me and my husband.
Thank you. Anyone else present that would like to speak in the initial public comment?
My name is Pam Triolo.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, there should be a sign-up sheet there.
Yeah, I'm going to put my name on it.
Thank you.
You just need our name, nothing else? Okay. Okay. I've got it. Okay. We moved to Boulder City in 1998 and absolutely love living here. A wonderful thing about this town is that we never just we always go overboard. I mean, but it's great. We have 2 golf courses. Our parks and facilities are terrific. We have a really nice library, and we will be building a new pool for everybody in the town, young and old. We go above and beyond, except it seems when it comes to handicapped parking. My husband has had mobility issues for about 7 years now, and on good days he uses a cane, and on bad days he has to use his walker. And he drives so he can be independent, but that independence can only occur if he can go places and park. And we have discovered we love to come in and eat at Jack's, Milo's. Jack's is our favorite. But usually we'll come by, there's no parking. There is one handicap spot there in front of the coffee cup, but if you notice now, if anybody goes by, there's benches where the handicapped person can go up where there isn't a curb. And like I said, my husband has good days and bad days. On a bad days, he can't get up a curb. So he really needs that access to get up, but that one's blocked. So we just go on in and we go into Henderson to eat. And we would much rather give our business to Boulder City. Let's see. Okay, I looked up my stats. 29% of Boulder City is over 65, which is a really high number. And you put that together with over 45, and we've got over 50% of the people are over 45. So I thought I would look up another town, maybe comparable. It's hard in Nevada to find comparable towns, especially in southern Nevada. But Mesquite only has 19,000 people, and I kind of considered that. A lot of people go there to retire, but they only have 16% over 65 and 27 over 45. So considering we've got at least a quarter of our people over 65, and that's where we get a lot of the disabilities. I admire all the people going around in their wheelchairs and everything, but it is difficult. And I would like my husband to be able to remain as independent as possible. He can go to the barbershop. Going to the dentist, Dr. Huber, the last time, the handicap spot is down at the beginning, kind of close to Sherman's. So it was filled. So if that one's filled, even if it's not filled, then he has to walk all the way up to the dentist. I would think that doctors and dentists should have handicapped spaces almost in front of them. I would recommend that we put more than what is required. The other night, a couple weeks ago, I was in town with friends or at Jack's one evening early, and I do notice in front of the Water and Power, nobody parks there. And that's maybe half a block for people who can walk. And if there's some way, maybe we can encourage people as they come into town, park here and walk our city, or something to get people to park there so we can leave more parking spaces for people with mobility and other disabilities. It would be very appreciated. And I really appreciate that you're now taking this ADA thing on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else present that would like to speak? All right, at this time, we'll take anyone wishing to call in. The phone number is 702-589-9629. This is the initial public comment period for the city council meeting. That number again, 702-589-9629. Again, this is our initial public comment period for the city council meeting, and we have a caller.
Public comment.
Yes, I'd like to make public comment.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, this is Judy DeShane. First off, I'd like to thank Pam and Cindy on the ADA comment. I am a handicapped person, mobility issues, but I do agree with them. I rarely eat in town anymore since the restaurant closed because there's no place to park, where by the time I get to the restaurant, I'm not exhausted if I can even walk that far. And like Pam's husband, I have good days and bad days. So it is dependent upon how I get up that morning and how good I'm doing. All right, now that was item 17. Now I'll go back to the beginning. Item 8, the historic preservation one. Now I have no idea what you guys are going to do, but based on what you did when all the people from Colorado and Denver Street came and spoke against the text amendment and opening that one building up for a mortuary and whatever, and you all decided it was more important to do that than to believe the people that lived in the area. I'm going to assume you're going to knock down the historic preservation thing too, which is a crying shame. That's really disgusting. But when you do, you need to take $200,000 out of the budget and reallocate it someplace else, something that's worthwhile, because there's no way that money should stay for helping people do historic preservation on buildings when we're no longer doing it. So I am very upset about what the Planning Commission did. Now I can see making changes, but that isn't what they recommended. They just outright disallowed it. So I really disagree with that, and I think it's a crying shame. And the other thing is that when you disallow it, then you also have to require the realtors in town to stop marketing these products, these homes, as historic, because there is no such thing anymore, and we don't have a historic preservation. The other thing is, what we do have on the national and the state register is the old hospital. It's been gone for 7 or 8 years. Somebody needs to figure out how to delist that, because we've already taken that away. Item number 15, the RV park. I initially didn't think it would be too bad, but as time goes on and I see comments from other people and them bringing up issues I didn't think about, I will have to say I am not at all in favor of that project anymore, and particularly leasing the land for that amount of time. 74 acres is a fair amount of acreage, and I'm not in favor of it. So I'd like to see that go down in flames at this point without having input from the entire community, not just the planning commission and not just the council. I think we need to do something positive and give the residents a voice. And the other thing is I'm not excited about giving the library that 1 acre of land or thereabout. When the last bond for the library expired, they kept taking out the money on our taxes. If you go back and look at the itemized, your itemized tax bill over the last 4 or 5 years, I can't recall what it was, they never gave us the money back. So I'm not really inclined to give them the land. It seems to me they were not very honest, and I don't believe they'll be real honest about how they use this land. So I'm not in favor of that either. So I think that's about it, the things that really bugged me about this one. Thank you for listening, and thank you again, Pam and Cindy, for bringing up the ADA. And the only thing I do hope the city doesn't do is change the steps in City Hall, because they really are usable to someone like me. I can go up and down those steps in pretty much of a normal manner because they aren't hung. They're made probably for kids, and maybe that's why it works so well for me. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Again, this is our initial public comment period. Anyone wishing to call, the phone number 702-589-9629. The phone line is available if anyone wishes to call for the initial public comment period. The phone number again is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, did we have any emails for the initial public comment period?
Yes, we do. The first one is from Judith Hoskins. Thank you, Mayor and council members, for allowing me to submit my remarks on agenda item number 8, Bill 1921, Historic Preservation. I support the proposed amendment to Title 11 of the City Code. Contrary to some remarks made at the Planning Commission, the Historic Preservation Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee, Director Mays, and members of staff have been involved with the proposed ordinance. This has been in the works for several years. There has been community input, open houses, and many meetings explaining the ordinance. Every property in the historic district, including businesses, received notification of those open houses. At those meetings, committee members and staff were present to answer the public's questions. I attended most of these meetings, and to my surprise, there were only a few business owners who attended. At the last open house, there was only one business owner in attendance. In other words, this ordinance has been well reviewed by many different experienced individuals, discussed for several years, and is ready for your approval. Several of the Planning Commission members voiced their concern and mentioned it would be like having an HOA, implying how terrible that would be, yet at least 3 of the members live in an HOA. I am sure they moved there in part because it had an HOA. Also, as former president of an HOA and former real estate agent, I can tell you that homes with HOAs sell quicker than those without. 3 of the members are also employees of a well-known Boulder City real estate company. I am sure these members would agree they have sold many homes within HOAs in Boulder City. The rules and regulations that property owners must follow within an HOA are reflected in the stabilization and escalation of the property values. Please vote to preserve the history of Boulder City. Next comment was submitted by Dr. Valerie McNay. I support the proposed historic preservation ordinance and hope City Council members will too. I read the comprehensive 17-page draft historic preservation ordinance and appreciate the 2 years of discussion and work by the Ad hoc Historic Preservation Committee, consisting of 2 Historic Preservation Committee members and 2 City Council members in the creation of this ordinance. I believe the city staff, City Council, and Historic Preservation Committee have been doing a good job of preserving historic structures in Boulder City, but clearly need to do better as historic resources have declined from 82% to 42%, which is below the minimum threshold required for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. I do not live in the historic district, but I know many Boulder Cityites who do, and most attend the Historic Preservation Day and informative activities, including the proposed changes in the ordinance from voluntary to mandatory and enforceable preservation features which apply in a fair and sensible way to the front of properties. Most appeared supportive of the new proposed historic preservation ordinance. The 2 new historic preservation grant funds, including residential $100,000 with up to $10,000 per project, demonstrates the support the city has been doing to help with historic preservation in Boulder City. Please support this proposed historic preservation ordinance. Next comment was provided by Koki Booth, and this is regarding RV, the Elite RV. I am opposed at this time for the following reason. 99-year leases are often used by franchises and big box stores as well as other commercial entities. The corporation headquarters will normally purchase the land and allow the tenant developers to construct and use the facility. We are not selling the land to a developer. We are skirting that process. We don't allow the tenants at the airport to lease for 99 years. Why would we allow an RV park to lease for 99 years? We will be adding 275 new residents to Boulder City. What are the true costs of adding this many people to this community? Next, public comment was submitted by Kendra Wright. Members of the City Council, as a stakeholder in Boulder City, I am aware of the importance of a healthy economy. I see great value in the Elite RV Resort project. The opportunity to increase our overnight stay capacity will allow Boulder City to continue to build on tourism. Both residents and businesses will enjoy the thoughtful and superior partnership that Elite RV Resort will bring to this area. I thank you for your consideration of this project as it is a wonderful display of how a public-private effort can drive appropriate economic growth. And that's it.
Thank you. One last opportunity, anyone present wishing to speak in the initial public comment period. Please come forward. And if you would state your name, and there's a sign-up sheet there, if you'd also write your name there, please.
I'm Mrs. English. The lights hurt my eyes, and I need to close them so I can focus, too, on speaking. I would like to comment about the ADA compliance, and I want to say I take great issue with the fact that local businesses have sabotaged the sidewalks. And I grew up in Las Vegas. My parents were entrepreneurs in food and beverage and gaming, so I'm very sensitive to the needs and supporting small businesses, but I'm a very agile person. I have very good vision, but yet it's difficult for me to navigate through on any of those sidewalks, and I have a long history with people with special needs, so I'm very sensitive to all the handicaps that they're confronted with, and motorcycles on Main Street. It would be nice if there was some kind of overflow parking spot for the motorcycles, especially since most of them are so loud. I don't know if any of the post office parking or BLM parking could be available for overflow during certain business hours. That's a rabbit trail. Also want to comment on the RV park. I am not in favor of that either, and we already have one mobile home park that is, the lots have been sold and people have bought ownership in the land as well as their RVs, and I think that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Again, if you'd please state your name and write your name on the sign-up sheets. Thank you.
My name is Rhonda Kaufman. There's been some spirited discussion regarding that historical preservation. I oppose it, but I don't oppose historic preservation, okay? The language in this ordinance, everything that came in the mail made sense. Everyone would support that. But when you start saying that you're going to charge people with misdemeanors and fine them $500 a day, that's not right. When I bought my home here, I bought it in the historic district, intentionally. And I've been stripped of my contributing status because of my windows. But my home is still lovely. And the tourists that come to this town, they enjoy this town for what it is. They don't see that my home is not contributing. And to be fined, this woman here, she said 25% of our residents are senior citizens. How many of those people are in those homes? That maybe they can't maintain them. Maybe they can't get up there and scrape the paint off of their windowsills. And they should be fined? Misdemeanors? The ordinance just needs to be rewritten. You guys put the time in. The information was good. Incentivize people. Don't punish people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we will close the initial public comment period and move to approval of the regular agenda. Madam City Clerk, any changes?
No changes.
Madam City Attorney
No changes.
and Mr. City Manager.
No changes to the regular agenda.
Thank you. Council, any changes from anyone?
No changes.
Anyone wishing to make a motion?
I move to accept the regular agenda.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, for the consent agenda, again, Madam City Clerk, any changes?
No changes.
Madam City Attorney
No changes.
and Mr. City Manager.
Yes, I'd like to request removal of item number 2, and we'll bring that back at a later date.
Thank you. Council members, any further changes?
No.
I am requesting that in addition to the removal of item number 2, item number 7 be moved to the regular agenda. And with that, I will make a motion for approval of the consent agenda with removal of item 2 and moving item 7 to the regular agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. For the edification of the public, what happens here when we do these agendas is there may be something on our consent agenda, which is supposed to be items that do not require any discussion or any information being provided to the public. I've asked for one item to be moved to the regular agenda so that there could be discussion, but a majority of council members have voted against having that discussion made public. Therefore, we will need another motion regarding the consent agenda.
I move to accept the consent agenda with the removal of item 2.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I am opposed.
Nay, myself.
We have motion pass 3-2 with Councilmember Adams and I dissenting. With that, we will move to item number 8, introduction of bill number 1921. Anyone wishing to make a motion?
I move to introduce bill number 1921, waive the reading by title only.
Bill number 1921, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, Nevada, amending Title III of the City Code to add a new Chapter 7, Historic Preservation Commission, and amend Title 11 of the City Code to repeal Chapter 27, Historic Resources, and replace with a new Chapter 27, Historic Preservation, AM 22-359. And this matter will be considered at the October 11th, 2022 City Council meeting.
Thank you. Item number 9 is also a bill introduction. Anyone wishing to make a motion regarding item number 9?
I will. I'd like to introduce Bill number 1922 and waive the reading except for title.
Bill number 1922, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, Nevada, approving agreement number 12-1418B between the City of Boulder City and Copper Mountain Energy, LLC, to amend lease agreement number 12-1418A to permit the development of a solar energy facilities and energy storage systems in lieu of a natural gas-fired peaker project for real property located at 751C El Dorado Valley Drive. This matter will be considered at the October 11th, 2022 City Council meeting.
Thank you. Item number 10 for possible action, lease agreement regarding the Radio Control Quarter Scale Association track. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, our Parks and Recreation Director, Roger Hall, will be handling this item, and I believe the President of the RC Quarter Scale Association of America, Mr. Leidecker, is also here to answer questions.
Good evening. Item number 10 on the agenda is a discussion and annual review of a lease agreement between the City of Boulder City and the RC Quarter Scale Association of America and a possible staff directive. The agreement between the City of Boulder City and the RC Quarter Scale Association was initiated into agreement here on October 17th of 2000. That's 22 years ago. The initial agreement provides for radio-controlled quarter-scale racing operations only. In November of 2019, an amendment to the agreement was made by council to allow for human-operated midget car operations at the racetrack. The midget car operation fell through, and no midget car racing is being done at the track and has ever been done at the track from that point. During the annual review at the September 28th, 2021 meeting, Mayor McManus requested an additional annual review for 2022. The following information was requested and provided by the RC Quarter Scale Association of America, and that included a report on the legal status of the nonprofit entity, income and expense statement for the nonprofit entity for the prior 12 months, the schedule of events held over the past 12 months, and proof of insurance, including any additional coverage that may have been required for the events held during the 12-month period of time. As requested, items have been provided and are included in the staff report for your review. I also have Karen and Bob Leidecker in the audience to answer any questions that you may have. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you. I did have a couple of questions for the Lydeckers, if they would like to come forward. Good evening. Thank you for coming this evening. I do want to express my appreciation for the record keeping that you're doing on this and the presentation of that information in our packet. I do see that both of you have contributed funds towards the project this year. But I also see that you had a fair schedule of events down there with some income. How do you foresee this coming year going?
No, I think next year's gonna be better if the economy gets a little better.
Okay.
You know, we've had a couple of bad years, you know, with the pandemic and everything, but.
COVID's not been good for many things. I know
We're holding
that.
our own, that's for sure.
You know, again, looking at the schedule that you had, there were several practice days, fun days, I think you refer to them, as well as some meets out there. Do you think that do you have enough interest from folks to increase that, or at least maintain what you were able to do?
Oh, yes, we picked up 3 new members, and I think that's pretty good with the way the economy is right now, and, you know, so I think next year's gonna be better.
That's great. Any issues that you have with the operation of things down there?
No, I don't have any.
Just appreciate us.
The opportunity.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I don't recall now how many years that track has been there, but.
22, I think,
Yeah,
longer.
I'm sure it was over 20. Any other questions or comments from council members? All right, thank you. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we won't see any spikes in COVID over the next year, and you'll get a few more members out there.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to have it out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, have a good night.
At this point then, I believe that a motion would be required to approve the lease for another year.
It looks like the recommendation is for the city council to receive the report and provide staff directive.
The term is in section 2. It says commence July 2019. Let me just make sure, yeah. And expires in 2024, so I don't believe there's any, it's still it's in effect currently.
Okay. I'm asking because it says for possible action, so.
I think the intent was if you wanted subsequent reports.
I would be willing to make a motion to require that the next report would be due to staff for review and not required for review by council unless staff believes there are items that need to be brought to council's attention.
I don't believe council attention's needed at this point.
I made a motion.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. We'll move to item number 11 for possible action, presentation of the draft capital improvement plan. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, so this is the first look at the capital improvement plan for financial year 24 through 28. And Director of Finance, Diane Pelletier, will be kicking this off. And we also have Budget Manager Angela Mannanen here. And I'll let Diane go ahead and start, but I'll jump in at any point you'd like me to.
You want to talk about your signature project before I get started?
So looking at the CIP this year, there's a major theme that we've been talking about throughout our past several meetings, and that's water conservation. And the largest project in the CIP for financial year '24 is a $2 million project to supplement Arpa funds that would be used for replacement of the irrigation system at the municipal golf course, which would result in significant water savings. So I'll let Diane go from here.
Okay. Well, normally we would do this in a separate meeting, but due to scheduling problems, we decided to just go ahead and do it at this meeting, because it really has to be done at this time of the year. But I'm going to start off the PowerPoint and go through that, and then Angela Mannanen will go over the fiscal year '24 projects. So, to turn this on. Okay. Okay, capital improvement plan. The purpose of a capital improvement plan is to annually review and monitor the state of the city's capital equipment and infrastructure. The capital improvement plan sets priorities for replacement and renovation based on needs, funding alternatives, and availability of resources. In this program, the city shall annually review its 5-year capital improvement program as required by NRS 350.013, including the current status of the city's infrastructure, replacement and renovation needs, and the potential for new projects. And what I'd like to mention is the difference between a capital improvement plan and an operating budget is a capital improvement plan can go over several years. Operating budget is always a 1-year budget. So, planning guidelines. All projects, ongoing and proposed, shall be prioritized based on an analysis of current needs and resources available. All related costs for every capital project, including but not limited to operation, maintenance, and replacement costs, shall be fully identified by funding source. So before I go on, I want to say that because of the time crunch, and we don't have hours to do this, we've tried to make a succinct presentation. So what I'm going to go through now is just background. So I'm going to start with the completed projects for the year just ended, June 30, 2022. And then I'm going to talk about the current projects underway, which were adopted by the council in May of '22. So the current year, starting July 1st, '22 to June 30, '23. Then also, I'm going to talk about ARPA projects, which those are not really capital projects. Those are grant-funded projects, but they're going to take up a lot of staff's time and resources. And then we'll get into the '24 proposed projects and funding. So completed projects in '22. There were 8 outside funded projects totaling $19.4 million, including Boulder City Parkway for $17.4 million. There were 11 general fund funded projects totaling $1.2 million, which closed in fiscal year '22. And 2 things we want to show you are Xeriscape Park and Boulder Creek pump repairs. So this was Xeriscape Park before, and this is after. So it's quite a difference. So before, after. And then if you look at the difference in the pipe replacement, this project was done at the golf course, I believe. But when I first looked at it, I couldn't figure out what was to see. But the white pipe is much thicker than the blue pipe. So that's the difference. That was the piping that had worn out and was replaced with the white piping, which is much thicker. So I'm pretty simple. I didn't know that, but I figured I'd throw that out there in case you were looking at it, wondering, like me, what the difference was. So now we go on to, there was 8 utilities projects completed in fiscal year '22. There was 8 projects completed, totaling $1.9 million. There's additional projects complete, waiting on final billings. And on those, you approved 2 of those this evening on the consent agenda. BC Tap to Buchanan Overhead Line, you approved the closing of that project in item number 3, and Red Mountain, you approved in item number 4. So those projects now can be closed, and we will close them out in our CIP tracking. So the other one waiting on is Arizona Street Feeder. Now we'll go into the fiscal year '23 projects. These projects were approved by council in May of '22, along with the fiscal year '23 operating budget. So there was a total of 64 projects approved in fiscal year '23 with a total cost of $48.5 million. Utilities projects were $20 million. $6.1 million of those includes funds from Arpa. The Muni Airport has $14.2 million, which is $14.1 million of that is FAA funded. And the streets is $6.945 million, and $6.895 is RTC funded. Once again, all this, no action is needed on. This was approved back in May. So, to go on. Now we'll talk about ARPA-funded projects. ARPA funding needs to be allocated by December 31st, 2024, and spent by December 31st, 2026. So therefore, it's a priority for the city employees to get that money utilized towards projects it can be utilized for and get them done. So fiscal year '24 CIP that Angela is going to go over with you includes $2 million of ARPA funding for water conservation at the municipal golf course, and this will allocate the remaining ARPA funds. That has not been officially allocated by the council, this piece. All the city's ARPA funding is currently allocated after that $2 million is allocated to water conservation at the Muni Golf Course. So at this point, once we get that done, in order to do any ARPA-funded projects, we would actually need to remove from other ARPA-funded projects. So now let's talk about ARPA-funded projects. So we have water and wastewater projects funded for $10,319,000. City facilities is $3 million assigned to projects that we'll show you on the next slide. Fire department substation, $1.6 million. Muni court remodel, $334,000. Emergency aid facility upgrades, $330,000. City hall ADA compliance, $250,000. Alley maintenance, $200,000. Broadband for city facilities, $100,000, and dog park, $72,000. The $3 million, which includes an additional $300,000 of general fund, are going to be used for Muni Golf Course water conservation, $2.5 million. City clerk, city attorney's offices remodel, $350,000. Replacement of an electrical panel in the police station, $150,000. City Hall office reconfiguration, $102,000. City Hall turf reduction, $70,000. City Hall break room, $60,000. City Hall bathrooms, $45,000. Install electric vehicle chargers, $13,600. Police station awnings, $86.50. All of these items have been approved through council action. So now we'll get into the ARPA unrestricted funding that has been spent. So we have 2 completed projects, the electric vehicle pilot program, that's for $350,000, and fire AED program for $50,000. So those projects are completed. And then under the restricted projects, those are related to water and wastewater. So restricted ARPA funding spent for water and wastewater projects as of August 31st. Water projects is $939,000, and wastewater projects is $151,000. So that money has been spent, ARPA funding. So now I want to just mention a little bit about the timeline. So the kickoff of the capital improvement plan for fiscal year '24 actually started on August 1st. And the finance team and the city manager met with departments to review and revise the 5-year CIP. And every department, we met individually. It was myself, the city manager, the capital improvement program coordinator, and the budget manager, met with every department director. And it was a very short agenda, same questions to each one. It was, what's the status of your current projects? We want to know what they were doing with their Arpa funding and the projects that they were responsible for. And we asked every department, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and what do you need to get there? And basically, that meetings went well. Every project for fiscal year '24 was already in the plan that was actually approved last year by the council. When you adopted the 5-year plan, the projects listed in '24 are the projects we are bringing you tonight. So no projects were removed and no projects were added. But we went through that with every department. And then after that, we had a full meeting with all the directors in the room. And actually, we did this presentation with all the directors. And so everybody knew what everybody had in their budgets, in their requests. So we went through all that, and which brings us to tonight. So Angela will now go over the proposed fiscal year '24 capital improvement list of projects and funding, which we will be asking you to tentatively approve in November. All of these projects were in last year's CIP plan. I know I'm repeating myself, but I think it's important to know. And all the fiscal year '24 projects are in the plan. No projects were removed. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Angela so she can take it from here.
Hi. Angela Mannon, Budget Manager. So, going to go over the fiscal year '24 projects that we're going to request tentative approval on November 22nd at the council meeting. So we're going to start with streets. There's an arterial reconstruction project for $1 million, a traffic signal and intersection improvements of $400,000. Both these projects are funded by the RTC, and streetscape rehabilitation of $50,000. So a total of $1.4 million. Public Works also has city facility parking lot renovations of $200,000. Communications requested projects are to replace and upgrade the camera system in the city council chambers for $50,000. Replace and upgrade the audio and microphone system in the council chamber for $25,000, for a total of $75,000. Parks and Rec projects for fiscal year '24 include the Recreation Admin Office lobby renovation for $77,000, park irrigation replacement for $100,000, park improvements of $200,000, and ABC Park building and grounds renovations of $250,000 for a total of $627,000. The Boulder Creek Golf Course projects include golf course improvements of $100,000, the golf carts for $283,000, which we're currently in contract for 3 more years, and the Boulder Creek equipment lease of $140,000, which is coming out of the surcharge account, for a total of $523,000. The municipal golf course projects for '24 include cotton tree removal of $70,000, which also comes from the surcharge account. The golf carts, which is $145,000. Golf course improvements of $75,000, and golf course equipment to own of $100,000, which is coming from the surcharge fund, and the golf course irrigation system upgrade of $4 million, for the total municipal golf course projects of $4.3 million. Fire projects include the training tower facility of $1.2 million, and the fire department classroom and adjacent parking of $1.3 million, for a total of $2.5 million. Police projects for '24 include security camera and electronic door access replacements of $150,000. This is actually a 5-year project that the final year of funding is currently in fiscal year '24. It was a $700,000 project, which is updating cameras and all our access controls throughout the city. And also a police station model of $500,000 for a total of $650,000 for fiscal year '24. Electric projects for '24 include the 4 kV to 12 kV overhead line conversion for $750,000, Circuit 63 to 64 tie of $1.9 million, refurbished transmission switches of $798,000, and a 3-phase and commercial meter upgrades and replacements of $412,000 for a total of $3.9 million. Water projects for fiscal year '24 include installing PRV at the airport at the lower end of Georgia for $250,000, ARV and backflow replacements of $50,000, an 8-inch butterfly valve replacement of $50,000, and design install PRV for twin 5-tower zone below Adams for $750,000 for a total of $1.1 million. Sewer projects for '24 include concrete line basin improvements of $200,000, lift station 3 improvements of $178,000, rehabilitating sanitary sewer mains for $700,000, and lift station 4 improvements for $60,000 for a total of $1.1 million. The airport projects include rehabilitating taxiway B for $3.7 million, and rehabilitating the hangar taxi lanes for $484,000, and rehabilitating the access road and vehicle gate for $200,000 for a total of $4.4 million. Of this, a lot of this is FAA funded. The airport matching for these projects is only $300,688. The project of the cemetery for fiscal year '24 is entrance landscape renovation of $100,000. The funding sources for fiscal year '24 capital projects include the general fund of $3.2 million, the utility electric fund of $3.9 million, the water fund of $1.1 million, the sewer fund of $1.1 million, the cemetery of $50,000, the airport of $300,000, the residential construction tax of $50,000, the golf course surcharge funds of $170,000 for municipal golf course, and the Boulder Creek surcharge fund of $140,000. The voter approved funding of $1 million, and proceeds from Track 350 of $2.5 million, FAA funding of $3.4 million, FAA bill funding for $616,000, RTC of $1.4 million, and the American Rescue Plan for $2 million, for a total projects for fiscal year '24 being $21.1 million. So some new funding for fiscal year '24 that we haven't had in the past is a bipartisan infrastructure law, which is a new competitive airport grant that funds at 90%. The other FAA grant funds at 92.75, so our match is only 6% on that one. Also, sale of Track 350 to be split 10% to public safety and the remaining to pay for the swimming pool recreation center project, which was approved in the 2021 election. The fire project's training tower and the classroom for a total of $2.5 million are currently being funded by the sale of Track 350. We also have the ballot question number 3 in this year's election, which would approve $7 million of the voter-approved capital improvement funding to be used for public safety. So if by chance we do not sell Track 350 and that money is not available for the training towers for the fire, the next option would be if the $7 million ballot question passes. And then if that also didn't pass, there is currently $2.9 million available in the Acquisitions and Improvements Fund that could be used for these projects. So new projects in the 5-year plan since our fiscal year '23 CIP adoption include the need for the city to have a committed building for safety. We're currently looking at existing buildings, or if a new building is needed. There's a placeholder currently in fiscal year '25 for $1 because we're not sure what the cost of this building would be. And other ideas being researched is just more city space, the need for meeting rooms and also storage, and analyzing our current storage if it's really maximizing its use. That brings us back to the calendar of this year's CIP. We'll meet again on October 11th for direction and possible changes of the draft CIP. And really the goal of this meeting and the next meeting is to have council's questions answered for this CIP for fiscal year '24 CIP for the tentative approval in November.
So with that, we can answer any questions you may have. We have the meeting on October 11th, which gives you time if you want to digest everything we've said and have questions for us that evening. But it would be nice if you have some issues you do want us to research, that we would find out about it this evening so that we can be prepared for that October 11th meeting. But once again, the focus should be on the fiscal year '24, because that is what we really need a tentative approval on, because that helps us to decide how we can handle the operating budget, how we would budget in the upcoming year.
Questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. I guess for my first question, I'll start, since it was the first thing discussed, was the $4 million for, it says irrigation for golf course. And it says irrigation upgrade. Is that, the $4 million is simply for an irrigation system upgrade, or are we talking about something much bigger? Or does that include turf removal? Does that include redesign of the course to meet the water conservation needs that we have? What is that $4 million? Because that number stands out.
Right. It's for the irrigation system only.
Okay, so I guess that'll get me to my next question, and it more so is, where would something like a turf removal project go, and would that be something that we would see on CIP? Is it something that we should be considering for future capital improvement? Because the turf needs to come out. That is going to cost money. Is that something that is looked at in one lump sum and is a project in and of itself, or is each individual thing looked at on its own?
Okay, I can make some comments on that. The turf removal is almost like an Arpa type thing. It's SNWA offering us money to remove turf. So it's really outside of the CIP, because it's almost like a grant. They're saying every amount of turf we remove, they're going to give us some money for it. So the thing we do need is money to pay it in advance, and then we get money back. And it's not a dollar for dollar. So that's the extent of my knowledge on it. So we do have money in the CIP for turf removal. So I think it's about $500,000. And I think some of that is in this year's budget, right? Is that this year's? So it's in this year's budget.
And Councilman Adams, so a few other things we're able to do. SNWA does more on the rebate program than just turf removal. So for cross-seeding the fairways to the warm season grasses, we can get a rebate for that. Eliminating ponds that aren't needed for the irrigation system, we can get rebates for that. We also can get rebates for relining the ponds. And we believe ultimately we would have enough to redo that to get to the 4 acre-feet water budget. But it is a reimbursement.
And it is a complex project because it involves parks throughout the city, it involves the golf course, it involves City Hall out here. So we're going to carefully make sure we track all the steps we're taking to remove turf and make sure that we're tracking it and working with SNWA together to make sure that we don't miss something or do something. They say, well, we weren't aware of that, or you couldn't do it that way and we can't reimburse you. So it is being done. It's being discussed openly every month at our golf course meeting, and I believe it is also being worked on by other departments in City Hall too. But it's a project that is currently underway, so it's not really dependent on approval of this.
And beyond the golf courses are the, parks or just the medians and other areas where there's non-functional turf. Would that also, is that also part of that 500,000 that's?
Well, that's what we're trying to work out with SNWA, that we could use that to remove turf and then apply for the rebates. So it's a whole program that we have to get off the ground, and we're working on that.
And we're currently in discussions with Southern Nevada Water Authority, so they know where we're at. We are working hand in hand with them to get this off the ground as soon as possible.
Correct.
Yeah.
And a couple council meetings ago, you approved that first turf removal project, accepting the interlocal with SNWA for the payment of the reimbursement of the, I believe, $1.1 million once we do the project. I was speaking with our Public Works Director the other day, and we are looking at moving forward with some of those easy things like the medians and the right-of-way between the trees and the street to remove those ourselves and do it in-house. So those would be more cost-effective for us because we'd be doing them on a little bit larger scale, so we'd be able to get things in bulk and things of that nature.
Gotcha, okay. And then I also see cottonwood tree removal. Is that just the removal of cottonwood trees? Are we replacing them with anything anywhere? Is this all of them? You know, I'm assuming these are established trees. I'm kind of just curious what that project.
I don't know.
Well, it's been an ongoing project, so the cottonwood trees at the golf course, the roots have been going to irrigation system, so it's to address that issue.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
And we may have some of these directors around City Hall, so if we
Any
get
of them want to pop up, yeah, if they're better to answer.
Right, yeah, if we get stumped, then we'll bring back those answers on the 11th.
I did want some clarification. You had mentioned, when we talked about ARPA funding, and you mentioned, when we were discussing the project for city facilities, that it's already been approved through ARPA, and I just want a clarification because I know when we were talking,
the council approved it.
Right. Yes, and so I just want to make sure I'm clear here because I know when we were talking, there were a number of projects in which there was a worry that if we don't start identifying now, we could run out of time because the time is very limited. However, things might present themselves as being more important. You already mentioned that, if we do want to add more with these items that have been identified, that means something will have to come off the list.
Right.
And that being said was that we would then, a lot of these projects would have to come to us for approval before, they would finally start to move forward. And I guess I'm curious what on here, is the city, the $3 million set aside for the city's funding, that has been approved and will be moving forward as of right now, that project would there need to be any further?
This series of projects I mentioned that
yeah.
were part of the $3 million?
Yeah, is there any more consideration from city council? Will that come before us again, or will that move forward, or?
Anything over $150,000 will come to the council for approval.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure here, just so that we're being very careful and thoughtful about all this. And then finally, just in discussing, we're looking at ideas being researched, things being considered. There's talk of need for more meeting space for the city, maybe a building committed to Safe Key. I'm curious, where are we as far as consideration for future projects? The level at Lake Mead continues to decline. It could reach, power dead pool, in a matter of years. That will have a direct impact on us and our ability to purchase power at, a rate that residents are used to paying for as far as their utility rates go. What area, where are we looking to see to make sure that we're not being caught flat-footed? It's seeming more when this is going to happen and not if. Of course, we all hope that we can, stave it off for as long as possible, but should that happen, what are we doing to research and make sure that if there are capital improvement needs, major project needs to help supplement that power loss, where are we going to see that?
Right, so our utilities director, Joe Stubitz, has been researching that pretty heavily, and we do have some options. None of them are set in stone at this point, and probably not ready for me to present at this point, but we are researching very closely and as well as looking at all of our different agreements and making sure that we're able to take advantage of any power that might be available to us.
Yeah, I did see Mr. Stubitz back there with his laptop, so I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, so the power purchase agreements are out of the operating budget. So we are looking at that. So it's not necessarily relevant with the CIP. We're doing capital improvement projects that you've seen that's related to our infrastructure, but the power purchase agreements all come out of the operating budget.
Right, and I guess, my question was just if there is need for a capital improvement project, something, a community solar or something like that we would need to see in the future to supplement these needs, should we need that in the future, which could be very likely. What steps are we taking to research that, I guess is my question.
So we've evaluated community solar as an option. In order for us to do that, we would have to find off-takers to purchase that power in the springtime when we don't need it, or disconnect the system. So right now, we don't have the load demands to meet the needs of a 24/7, 365 community solar project.
Okay. And is this something that's been presented before the Utility Advisory Committee yet, or?
It's on the next agenda.
Awesome,
for
thank
a
you.
presentation.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I think at that point, that's all the questions I have. Thank you very much for all the information. It's very helpful.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Bridges?
Yes, just two things. One is, I love ClearGov. Thank you for not making me take home ginormous white binders.
You're welcome.
This is just wonderful, and just point and click and find that information, and being able to drill down and get that, get it is wonderful, and it answers a lot of questions. My other question, which is my constant companion, is the issue of our wastewater situation. And where does that fit into CIP? Are we saying maybe someday, if and when we come up with some sort of solution, then it would be looked at in terms of who's going to pay for it? Whether any of that was, it looks like there's no Arpa being addressed in terms of a means to get out of having our water going into the desert, and finding a solution to that.
So we have been researching this, and there are a lot of new grant-funded opportunities through the federal government with I believe it's the Inflation Relief Act? Okay. Inflation Reduction Act, yes. So our friends at the federal government have offered to help us apply for those when that time comes. The project to recycle the wastewater would be eligible if there were costs on our end that SNWA was not covering.
Okay, so it's there, but sort of hovering, right, and not being addressed specifically in the CIP.
Right. It's more like an ARPA type thing, where it would be like a grant funding coming along that we would allocate to that project.
Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you. And again, thank you for ClearGov. I think that was a brilliant investment.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? This is a question really more for Mr. City Manager. You know, as I look at the timeline on here and the various discussions, I see no mention whatsoever of the Utility Advisory Committee. And we have projects that are in the millions of dollars related to utility functions, but no mention of that committee. I think that's a real problem for this council, since that committee was created specifically to provide recommendations and comments for this council to consider as we look at these various projects, and yet they're not included anywhere in the process that's been described here. I think that that's a failure. I think that it harms the council in order to make these types of decisions. And I think it shows that the staff is really not looking at that committee as anything that's important to the decision-making process. That's unfortunate. We have a number of people on that committee that have a lot of experience. And again, no input is referenced in this presentation from the Utility Advisory Committee. They've been in operation now for a couple of years. I know that I've heard at their meetings that they do have recommendations, they do have ideas on this, and they're simply, that information is not getting to council. I know during the briefing that I had yesterday, Mr. Stubitz had said, well, they've been shown the information. I don't think that that's adequate to meet what the council had done by creating that committee and asking that that committee be allowed to review information and provide recommendations and comments when we get to this process here. So I know it's been said that, well, we'll get something from them. You know, this looks like a fairly complete list. And that's my concern, is that these lists get developed, they get put in writing, they get put in front of the council, and we're not getting that input from the Utility Advisory Committee along the way. I think that's something that would be a priority, to have that information available for councils to be able to consider in the future. Also, when I look at, we had an issue, it goes back a couple of years, where projects were continually being planned and never completed. They were being budgeted and never completed. The impression that it gave many members of the public was that we had $20 million sitting in the utility fund that didn't really exist. And when I look at what is planned here, the past year, I believe, Ms. Pelletier, you had said that there were 8 projects completed for a total of $1.9 million. And
Fiscal year 22, yes.
what's planned is $48.5 million with 64 projects to be completed.
And 20 million of that is utilities. And 6.1 million of that is going to be using ARPA funding in some of those.
Okay, well, what I'm getting at is, once again, we seem to be getting into the situation that we've been, at least been able to resolve a little bit, where projects are being budgeted and never completed. And the money then rolls over to the next year, but the projects never get completed. I understand that, there's a time frame on these ARPA funds, and my concern is that the projects don't get completed and that money will revert back to the federal government. So again, this isn't for you. This is more, direction to how do we plan these things where it's within a realistic period of time to actually get the work done. That's not happened in the past. The item that we could not discuss earlier because a majority of the council refused to allow it deals with some of that, of reordering projects. So I think that also needs to be a consideration when we look at these types of things. How much can get done so that we're within that period of time, but what's realistic, because it's never been done in the past. So that's a concern. We also have some overlap depending on outcomes of ballot questions. That I don't see a way to answer within what we have now, because we don't know what the outcome of those ballot questions will be. We also don't know what's going to happen with the sale of Track 350. I know during public comment it was made that, well, we're going to have a new swimming pool. Well, we may not. It may be that the developer says, you know what, I'm no longer interested in this project, but we don't know how that's going to come out. So that's another potential hole in this whole budgeting process, is the outcome of those ballot questions. As far as a specific type of question, there was money in there. I believe the amount was $72,000 for a dog park. I believe there was some separate allocation for a nonprofit that runs an existing dog park. Are those two different sums or the same sum?
Two different sums.
Okay.
And I
So was
believe-
that ARPA funding also going to the nonprofit?
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't see it included in,
No, because
in the
that's.
expenditure of those funds.
Right, that's, well, I think that recently was paid out, so.
It's not on the list because it's a grant, not a CIP project. We gave them money to do their own project.
Okay,
That's right, okay. And there's also operation and maintenance money that wouldn't be totaled in here because it's operation and maintenance. It's funding that went towards the operation and maintenance budget, not capital.
well, and some of that's the case with the golf course improvements too. The cottonwood tree removal, isn't that a surcharge on each round of golf that's played?
No, the cotton tree removal is
Yes.
part of the capital projects for the golf course.
So it's funded through the surcharge.
Some of it, yeah, some of the things are,
Okay, so there's a surcharge on each round of golf that's played?
yes. That's been in place for several years now.
Okay.
Okay. The thing I would like to just mention right now, because it's a tentative approval we're asking for in November, which doesn't mean that there can't be changes to the capital improvement plan between then and the final approval. But in order for us to plan properly for our operation and maintenance budget, we kind of need a good number to be working off of. So we need to know whether the council supports what we're presenting here. So along the way, if ballot questions get approved, things like that, then this can change. But at least we need a starting point for when we start the operation and maintenance budget in January. So I just wanted to throw that in there. This isn't a
Well,
final
I
thing.
understand, yes,
Okay.
we're looking for a starting point, but we'd like to get that starting point somewhere that is a realistic starting
Yes.
point. With the, Councilmember Adams had mentioned earlier the $4 million for the irrigation at the municipal golf course. A concern I have about that is the amount of turf that's being removed at that course seems scant in consideration of how much turf is there. Spending that amount of money on irrigation when there's certainly a potential that more turf will be removed, you know, conjures up in my mind that we're gonna have a whole bunch of irrigation pipes running out there to areas that in the future no longer have turf. You know, these golf courses have been a huge investment by the people of Boulder City for the enjoyment of some folks. But we're looking at again, putting millions of dollars, and we're very fortunate to have these rescue plan dollars available to do that. But once again, we're pouring millions of dollars into these golf courses, and my concern is we're gonna wind up with something that a year, 3 years from now, it's gonna be, oh, we're gonna have to spend a whole bunch more money on more irrigation because the initial turf removal plan was not adequate to address the amount of turf that can and should be removed from that golf course.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I completely agree. We are going to look at a redesign of what the course actually looks like when planning the irrigation changes. So we'll make sure that the proper amount of turf is removed, more so than what we've been looking at removing with the existing irrigation system.
So that's part of the.
It's $4 million. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's a lot of money.
Right.
And when we talk about starting points, that's that problem of finding where that starting point is, that, you know, a few years from now, we don't come to the realization that $4 million wasn't well spent because we didn't have a good starting point for it. The Safe Key building, you know, we have buildings here in town that appear to be significantly underutilized. And the discussion always seems to be revolving around, well, let's build something new. You know, I'm not sure why we don't look at what our existing facilities are to say, well, what can be done with this?
We are going
And if
to.
nothing can be done with it, then, you know, something else, sell the property, demolish it, do something. But there's constant, well, you know, the fire department wants a tower that they can climb up. They want a training facility. The police department is interested in improvements for their facilities. It does not seem, and I know there was a report done referred to as the Stantec report that turned out to be close to a $500,000 boondoggle as far as I'm concerned, is it being able to provide information that would allow us to identify what the use of our city facilities would be. I think that needs to be something in there so that we can get a starting point. What is the idea of, and again, Ms. Pelletier, this really isn't directed at you, this is more for Mr. City Manager. You know, what type of plan do we have other than somebody wants something, so we'll just build a new one for them? I think there needs to be some coordination of effort on how we can utilize existing city facilities rather than building something new all the time. With the, you know, there's reference in here to emergency aid. You know, emergency aid is a local nonprofit here, has been here pretty much from the beginning of Boulder City. This project is for improvements at a city-owned facility, the former water and power building. So I don't want to leave the impression that that money is going strictly for emergency aid. The Red Mountain Music Company has facilities at that same building. The building is used by other organizations for various things. I know Parks and Rec does, line dance programs and yoga programs and some other nice things over there. So I just don't want to leave the impression that that money is going strictly for one individual nonprofit. It's to put some money into an older building here in town that many groups get use out of and would probably benefit from in the future. I guess I'll leave it at that. Again, probably my biggest disappointment is the lack of input from the Utility Advisory Committee. Mr. Stubitz had made the comment about, in response to Councilmember Adams' question about, what do we do if we start running out of Hoover power to purchase? And the answer is, we can't do anything in regard to community solar because you just have to switch it off. It seems like there's other solutions. Other communities have found other solutions, and to say that that's the only alternative for community solar doesn't seem like that's what's out there in the literature for community solar projects. We could run into a real problem, and when we talk, Mr. Stubitz had mentioned the difference between the operating budget and the capital improvement budget. That's a decision that gets made each year when we approve those budgets, is how much goes into capital improvement and how much goes into operations. So to say that, well, that's it, that's the division there, that really doesn't track with what the process is. And I think it's very disappointing that the answer is, we've looked into community solar and it's not viable, therefore we're doing something else. I see all kinds of things in current literature of communities making valuable use out of that type of thing. And we're in a position where that could well threaten the income of all of our residents if we have to go out and purchase power on the open market for years to come. Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes, thank you. First off, I want to thank the staff for your comprehensive look at this. We have an unprecedented experience here where we've received monies that we would have to give back if they were not used. So I recognize that 8 completed projects last year as opposed to 64 is probably pretty high, but it gives us the opportunity to be able to hopefully complete them by the date that they need to be completed. I have confidence that what's happened in the past will not happen in the future. We've learned from the past. We're going to move forward. We're going to accomplish these things, and we're going to use the money for the benefit of this community. And I appreciate your hard work. I appreciate your willingness to assess the needs as far as safety. I always ask this question, Elaine K. Smith Building? I don't know, close to Park and Rec. I mean, what do we need? There are facilities, but I also see that it has to be useful. We do have an aging infrastructure, not just in utilities, also in our actual physical assets. We are a historic community, and a lot of what we are using has historic value, but also with that historic value comes some rundown and need for attention. And so as I look at this, and I realize we had some bounds within which we had to spend our ARPA funds, including, I asked the question about utilities yesterday, and I know that you answered and said utilities really was not all the way an allowed use for ARPA. And so what it was, could you explain that a little better for me?
You can use it for water and wastewater, but electric is not part of the uses that ARPA funding can be used for.
Okay, and I know that I also asked about the $2,500,000 for Track 350 and possibly the passing of the ballot question.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your answer on that. And in the worst case scenario, right, we will be looking for funds to make up that $2,500. I also appreciate we have unprecedented times. We're living in a time where there is a drought present, and we are trying to not just spend this money wisely, we are also looking for ways to conserve our water and to utilize this money in some of those ways. So I appreciate your being proactive in this and looking at these things. It does look like all of our funds will be spent. That's a little concerning to me, but always because I'm used to that whole savings program, you know, where you have a little left over, but I also don't want to be left holding the savings and giving it back. I want to do what's best for this community. So my thought would be, let's go get 64 projects done in '23.
Well, those are already approved. The 23 ones, well, the staff is challenged with those tasks already. You've already given us authority to do that, and they've already started working on them. So it's
I have
quite a
full
slate.
confidence you will. So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify something you had said, that, you know, there are restricted American Rescue Plan funds for water and wastewater projects. Is that correct?
The restricted funds can be used for water and wastewater, and I believe broadband, but that's pretty narrow what we can use it for.
And that's half of the funding that the city received?
A little bit more, because 10 million can be used, that those rules changed after a while, where 10 million could be just used by the city for projects it wanted to use it for, but the balance, whatever was left, which is about 11 million, has to be used for those restricted purposes.
Okay, so the point I'm getting at is it's about 50-50 on the restricted and unrestricted. So to say that, well, we can't use any money for the electric fund, no, actually half of the money is unrestricted and could go to projects within that. Is that correct?
Well, there's already 10 million, well, 11 million going into the utilities. So yes, it wouldn't be direct, we would be using the unrestricted funds for electric. But because the utility, water and wastewater, is already getting 11 million, when you combine them all together, it does allow adequate funding for the electric projects when you group them together.
Mayor, if I may, I think
Well,
I
I
understood.
think I already understand the question. It's the way things are being presented that
You
causes
could
confusion.
You could reallocate the unrestricted money to be used in whatever way you wish. Yes.
You could.
And we also know that the utility fund is one enterprise fund, even though we have, for the purposes of budgeting, broken it out into 4 different accounts of electric, water, wastewater, and landfill. It's still one fund. So money can be moved within that fund because it is an enterprise fund, and other funding can be put into that enterprise fund that is not the direct payment from ratepayers. I know that's also been a point of confusion in the past, that we could not put other money in. It's been done in the past. Certainly we're doing it again with these restricted rescue plan funds.
Well, as an enterprise fund, it should be self-supporting. And I'll stop there, but, I mean, that's really
I
the rules
understand
on
that, but the fact is, the federal government made a decision to allow for funding of projects that include things within the utility fund.
Yes, and 50%.
We could give the money back. We could tell them, no, we're gonna require our ratepayers to make sure they pay for everything. But when we get an offer like this from the federal government, it's best to use that in a way that benefits our residents to the greatest extent possible.
And I believe the council has made choices that will benefit the residents.
I do as well. You know, this money is going to do a lot more than just good things here in Boulder City, because the money is going to pay people to do the work. It's going to pay manufacturers to hopefully build some of these things, make some of these parts here in the USA. It's a great program. The question is making sure we use it to the best possible use for our residents.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Pelletier.
Okay, and this will come back on October 11th for further discussion.
Thank you. Brings us to item number 12 for possible action, matters pertaining to 920 Villa Grande Way. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, our Community Development Director, Michael Mays, will be handling this item.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. The vacant parcel at 920 Villa Grande Way has been zoned as C1 neighborhood commercial for the last 40 years, as you can see on the screen and also within your packet. The new owners of this property would like to build a single-family home. And so they submitted an application proposing rezoning to R110 to allow for that single-family home to be developed. This is consistent with all of the surrounding zoning, as you can see on the screen, with the subdivision that is all zoned R110 in yellow. So, Planning Commission heard this request on August 27th and recommended unanimously to rezone the property to R110. You have before you tonight a public hearing which is required, and then consideration of Bill number 1919, which is subject to the findings contained on page 554 of your packet. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. And as Mr. Mays indicated, there is a public hearing for this item. So I would suggest if members have comments or opinions to hold those till the public hearing is completed. But if you do have specific questions for Mr. Mays, now would be a good opportunity. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Mays. I will go ahead then and open the public hearing on this item. If there is anyone present that would like to speak on this, please come forward at this time. All right, we will take anyone wishing to call in on this item. The phone number to call is 702-589-9629. This is a public hearing regarding item number 12, bill number 1919 for 920 Villa Grande Way. The phone number to call is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any emails received regarding this item?
No written comments were received.
Thank you. All right, hearing no one, we will close the public hearing. Any other questions or comments from council members? Anyone wishing to make a motion on bill number 1919?
I move to approve bill number 1919.
I believe we need inclusion of the findings.
Let's see. Yeah, including the findings by council.
Is that sufficient, Mr. Mays?
Yes, I think just reference to the findings contained in the staff report.
In the packet, thank you. Anyone wishing to second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes unanimously. And at this time, we will take a 15-minute break and resume at 7 p.m. Thank you. Thank you. I will call the meeting back to order, and we will be on to item 13 for possible action, consideration of bill number 1920. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Diane Pelletier, our finance director, will be handling this item, which is the land transfer to the library.
Meeting. So consideration of Bill 1920 is an ordinance of the City of Boulder City approving agreement number 22-1993 to authorize the conveyance of real property consisting of 0.9 acres located at 651 Adams Boulevard from the City of Boulder City to the Boulder City Library District for the public purpose at no cost. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have on that, and I believe there's some library representatives here also.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. Yeah, the only question I had was regarding the deed restriction, and it said could it be used for a public purpose, including without limitation a public library, and I was just curious about the definition of public use or public purpose.
Essentially, a public purpose is providing facilities or services for the benefit of the public, for example, if for the public health, welfare, or safety.
And so no private interest would be allowed then?
That's right. It would have to be used, it couldn't be used to benefit a private interest.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know that this has been an idea that's been around for a few years. I know I've spoken with library staff and the board. I think this is beneficial and will allow the library, whatever may happen in the future, to be able to utilize that lower level if it ever is finished out, whether it's for parking or whatever it may be. So I will make a motion to approve bill number 1920, providing this land at no cost to the library district.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, Ms. Pelletier. Item number 14, for possible action, matters pertaining to changes to property at 383 Claremont Street. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Michael Mays, again, our community development director, will be handling this and the next item.
So in 2021, the City Council approved the sale of what we refer to as Track 355 to the owners of 383 Claremont in order for them to be able to construct a home at this property. This is a cleanup item to have the land management plan land use designation conform to the zoning and the use that is being proposed. And as you can see on the screen, the property in question is currently designated as open lands, and Resolution 7519 would allow for the conversion of the land use from open lands to what we call low-density residential, which would be consistent with the remainder of the lot and the adjacent subdivision. Planning Commission did consider this on August 17th and recommended unanimous approval for the land use designation change. And so before you is Resolution 7519. It includes a finding which is contained on page 581 of your packet. And of course, this also requires a public hearing. And then I will take any questions.
Thank you. And again, as this does require a public hearing, unless you have, other than a specific question for Mr. Mays, any council members? All right, I will open the public hearing then. Anyone present that would like to speak regarding this item? All right, we will take any calls. Anyone wishing to phone in, the number 702-589-9629. And this is with regard to item number 14, regarding a property at 383 Claremont Street, number 702-589-9629. Again, this is a public hearing for item number 14 pertaining to 383 Claremont Street. Anyone wishing to call in, the number 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any emails received regarding this item?
No comments were submitted.
Thank you. All right, hearing no one, we will close the public hearing then. Any further discussion, questions, or comments from council members? Anyone wishing to make a motion regarding this item?
Yes.
Councilmember Bridges?
Thank you. I would make a motion to accept resolution number, this is 7519, with the findings of NRS 278.220.2.
Anyone wishing to second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, item number 15, matters pertaining to modifying the master plan use for a proposed RV park. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Michael Mays, again, will be handling the Elite RV proposal.
So Elite RV is proposing a 74-acre luxury RV and cabin resort located west of Adams Boulevard and Veterans Memorial Drive. As they are seeking to negotiate a lease with the city, they were required earlier this year to go through the land management process. City Council on April 26th advanced that proposal through the land management process, and besides the requirement for Planning Commission consideration, also requested the Parks and Recreation Commission to review this proposal. They did so on May 23rd of this year, and their comments are summarized in your staff report. City Council did add this proposal to the land management process on June 28th. The next step in the process prior to lease negotiations is City Council consideration of amendment of the master plan land use designation for the 74 acres. On the screen, you can see the existing land use designations, which include open lands and parks and recreation, and the proposed land use change designation to community commercial. The Planning Commission received this request for the land use change designation on August 17th and voted 3-2 for the change, which in effect is a vote of no recommendation, as it doesn't meet the required 2/3 majority vote needed per NRS. For your consideration this evening is resolution number 7520, which is subject to the finding contained on page 591 of your packet. It's important to note that the action tonight is not the final action required for this project, but the next step in the process. In order for Elite RV to move forward, it requires successful negotiation of a lease with the City Council and City Council approval of rezoning of the 74 acres for this development to move forward. There is also a public hearing with this land use consideration, and I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Any specific questions before we go to the public hearing? Councilmember Adams?
I did have one question, just regarding the Planning Commission action where you said that because there were not 2/3, that's written into, I guess, their bylaw for this particular type of measurement, it requires 2/3 of them, and since there was only 3 in support, that would not make up the 2/3 of the entire.
That is correct.
And so even though
there was only 5 members in attendance, and it would require 5 for a 2/3 majority.
And so even though the motion was for approval, which had the majority there at the time, it essentially, because it didn't have that 2/3, is not that recommendation?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And again, it is just the Planning Commission recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other specific questions? Thank you, Mr. Mays. We'll open the public hearing then on this item. This is regarding item number 15 for the proposed recreational vehicle park and cabin rentals. Anyone wishing to call in, the phone number is 702-589-9629. This is a public hearing for item number 15 on our agenda, proposed changes to the master plan for a recreational vehicle park. Anyone wishing to call in, the phone number is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any written comments submitted for this public hearing?
No comments were submitted.
Thank you. All right, hearing no one, then we will close the public hearing and bring it back to City Council for any questions or comments. Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've gone back and forth on this. I know I've heard concern, we already have 2 RV parks, and neither one of them really is the same as what this appears to be. One, the people own their pads and spent a good time of the year on their pad. And the other is, there are people who are it's more residential, but there is a greater transience than there is at the one with the purchase pads. I'm under the impression that there's going to be pretty strict restrictions on the length of time that people can spend there. That it's not generally adding to the population in terms of permanent residency. And I think the only concern I've had, and I have asked this question of these gentlemen before, is the expense and requirements of actually linking this into the city wastewater and water system and electricity, that would be moving into a area that does not have any utilities currently, and that you still need the kind of, maybe I should ask the guys who are representing the project about the requirements of plugging your facility into city utilities. And I know I brought up the wastewater issue once, and probably gave you thought on that because it wasn't something in the original presentation. I know it was using less water than a typical house and so on, but.
Yes, thank you. My name is Frank Manzullo, representative of the project that we're discussing. And thank you for the question. Yes, we actually worked with Mr. Stubitz, city engineer, to actually look at that issue and see if it was an issue. And he actually went out, hired a third-party engineering firm to come do the study, and it came back, the recommendation was very positive. And it was that case then throughout.
Okay, so actually putting in a system, wastewater system that goes into our system, water and so on, because even though they're RVs, they're going to have those requirements, needing those. And also in terms of the cabins, I'm assuming in the cabins will have the same kind of restriction in terms of length of stay and wouldn't become permanent housing for
Absolutely correct.
certain residents.
Yes. Let me also add that any costs associated with hooking up to those utilities are our responsibility, not the city's as well.
Okay, thank you. That's it
welcome.
for right this moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes, I have a couple of thoughts. I've thought this over quite a bit. I've had some people contacting me, asking me questions. I've in turn gone about asking the questions. And I can see this from three different perspectives, right? So you have a stool. One leg is going to be the residents who live here, and they enjoy low property taxes. They enjoy a beautiful area to live, great utilities. Their services for the size of our city are pretty amazing, truthfully, if you go to a city our size anywhere else. You also enjoy slow growth. I enjoy slow growth. I'm a resident up here. I enjoy that. I want that. And then I see us as a city entity takes money to provide what we provide for you. So we've diversified our funding sources by going out and seeking solar farms, love them or hate them. They provide a huge ability for us to keep your taxes low and your utilities low. So, but we have all our eggs in one basket right now, pretty much. So I'm not saying solar's going anywhere. I'm just saying we have all our eggs in one basket as far as that goes. So we need to diversify our sources for income, I think, so that we can keep the things that we love about Boulder City where they're at. There is a business element to this community too. And I think I've lived here 25 years, give or take, 1 year, and I was here when a lot of the businesses were boarded up or when things did not look as great as they look now. I enjoy the benefit of being able to go downtown, and I hope our residents do too, and have a business available to them where they don't have to go over the hill, as we like to call it, right? That big hill. And we can stay here and enjoy our community. Now, that only happens if people come here. We only keep those businesses open because we do not have a large enough population to keep as many businesses as we have down there open and functioning. They have to make a living to be able to keep their doors open. So we have to look at that too. So how do we keep those businesses going without bringing a whole bunch of people here to live? How do we diversify our funding without bringing a whole bunch of people here to live? We know how Henderson solves that problem, and I'm not saying that that's bad. I grew up in Henderson, but what I'm saying is that was their choice. They grow. We have to find another way to keep our community vibrant and successful for those of us who live here. So we used to have the lake. We had people come in. We've all seen the lake lately. The ability to go do things on it has significantly decreased. So as I look at this, I see this as not the final step in the project. I see that we have a lot more say on this. I see that we could field a lot more questions, and we can see if it is beneficial for our community. But I do see it as an option. And I don't think it's going to hurt us at all to put it forward for future plan. Being on the future plan does not mean it's going to happen. It means that it can still be an option. And I do believe, and I will ask Michael Mays, as much as if we put it on the future plan, could we also take it off? Because I've heard this question asked, well, if it's on there and they don't work out, then anyone could come in and take that land. But we could change it back, right?
That is correct. The city council at any time could direct staff to go through the process again and revert it back to the original land use designations.
Okay, so I mean, I guess I'm looking from a holistic point of view and understanding what this process includes. And I know there's a lot of worry out there that this means now we have an RV, a high-end RV park coming. This is not what this means. This just means we can have more discussion. Yes?
I'm sorry, is that a question to me?
Pretty much. Pretty much a question. This leaves the door open for discussion because there's a ton more processes that this would ever have to go through before it became a reality.
Yes, the two major steps that still have not been accomplished is the negotiations with the city council on the lease. That lease, the council can stipulate any provisions within that lease they want to. This is city land, and the city council can dictate those terms. And in addition to that, it would require rezoning to accommodate this use, even with the master plan land use designation change. That doesn't obligate the city to ever rezone it for a commercial use. That's at the city council's discretion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Fox?
Yeah, I think this would be a big win for Boulder, this type of project, because we don't like our growth, and we like our temporary growth. And so, we depend on tourism. So bringing people in to visit Boulder, having them come in, spend their money, and go back. That's what we like out here. But I think, I think it's a win-win. Bring people in, let them leave without expanding in the housing market or anything like that. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for education on this, two previous items, they were already zoned prior to matching the master plan map, making sure that those purposes were in line. But this time we are making sure that we have, the master plan use first before we get to the zoning. Could you elucidate on that a little bit for the benefit of the public?
Yeah, so within our code, and this is within the land management process provisions, it requires this step for the land use to be in conformance before the city would proceed with the negotiations with the lease. And so that's why we're at this step at this point.
Okay, thank you. In general, this is, I think, kind of a challenging one as far as the process for appropriateness for land use in Boulder City, right? Because ultimately that is what we're talking about. We're talking about the master plan and the land use. Currently, the designation is open lands and parks and recreation, and I think nobody would question whether or not that fits the criteria of that area. I think it does so pretty well. then when reviewing the community commercial designation, it's in our master plan, I think it also fits the definition as far as the location and setting, right? It's there on the arterial with connectors. It seems to fit that. And really the only, notch against it is that it also considers a number of potential products that I feel might be inappropriate for the area. I'm not saying that the one that is currently proposed that's on the land management process map that we have right now is one of those, but it does consider those types of things, right? So I do think about, making this step now and what impact does it have. I do know that council can always go back and revisit this. I think that would be very wise of council to do should this not go forward. But sometimes it can be an opportune time for people to say, well, this is at least a step we don't have to take again, and we can move quicker on other ones, which has its benefits, but it also has its cons in the sense that it doesn't allow for the same amount of time for people to respond and give their input as they have with this one. Which is kind of my first point. Looking at the master plan for a long, for this, it served us pretty well for 20 years, but it definitely is starting to show some signs of age. And it does become a little bit hard to apply some of the chapters in the master plan to some of the things that we're considering, modern thoughts and principles. And I think the project that the Elite RV project is one of those, right? It's not really something that we were considering at the time, and it's kind of is a very unique fit that I think may benefit Boulder City well. We get to the point where, we've had this discussion a few times, many residents, commission members, on our different commissions, council members, we've raised concerns, raised questions, water use, length of stay, lease term agreements, impact on proximity on our airport. There's a lot of questions people have. And while I feel the representatives have done a lot to answer those questions, I think the most pertinent answers, they can't be answered at this time. There is a lot, that's this early in the process. So on the one hand, I think it would be of benefit to continue to move forward to allow the Boulder City residents to voice their opinion. Is this appropriate? What are the answers to the questions that they're looking for? And to just shut this off now, I think would be a disservice to just in that conversation. Because in the end, my support for this project will always be on whether or not the support for is there with our residents. I think that's key. I think it's also worth noting that many of the people who have highlighted concerns or raised questions have almost all stated that they are very interested in this project, that they think it is a well-fitting project for Boulder City. It's just that those questions and particular questions and concerns they don't feel have been adequately addressed. And so if we want to address them, then we should be able to move forward. So I'm kind of torn on this, right? Do we allow now so that we can continue forward, we allow conversations to continue, which I think is a benefit to the city? Or do we as a principal look at what does the master plan say under those current designations and what is most appropriate for that area? And between those two designations, open lands, parks and recreation, that's what it is now. That is clearly a great use for that land. Whereas community commercial, this project might be a great fit there. Other potential projects certainly I don't think would be. And that's kind of the conundrum I'm in here. I would like to see conversation continue further, which is why I would lean towards approving this now, and then should it not, hopefully having council go back and revisit this so that we don't allow something to sneak in under the radar. But again, I'm torn because I think on one hand we need to address issues with our master plan. I think we need to be very clear with what intent is for our land use, and I think this process is the best way to do that. But on the other hand, I want us to continue having these conversations so that we can reach the decision of what is best for Boulder City. And this project may very well be a great fit for the surrounding community, and I think provide a lot of benefit for us economically, not just Boulder City, but our businesses and too. So that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion here already, and these comments aren't directed at you, Mr. Mays, but many comments have already been made about, this is a tourist town. This will be great for tourism, all of that. You know, I've certainly seen times that we're pretty lean here in Boulder City as well. One of the issues we have is the way that the redevelopment agency was created here in Boulder City. As we see businesses do well, it does not benefit the residents of Boulder City, because the increase in those property values don't go to things like paying for additional police officers or new fire stations or things like that. That money goes into the redevelopment agency. So that's, you know, great for businesses. They've got quite a deal here in Boulder City with the way that's set up. But when we talk about how this is going to help residents here in Boulder City, that's simply not the case, because this property is also within the redevelopment agency, isn't it?
I'd have to reference the map.
Well, pretty much everything in that area is in the redevelopment agency, so I don't know that that part was specifically excluded. Matter of fact, the sale of Track 350, which is on the opposite side, is within the redevelopment agency. That land, 350 was taken out. 349, which has become residential housing, is still paying into the redevelopment agency because of how that was created. But again, I don't want to dwell on that. I certainly would like to get a clarification of that, because I think it's an important point, because we hear it all the time that, well, if we grow, if we create additional businesses here, we're going to see this benefit to the community. And certainly there are opportunities for additional employment. There may be some beneficial things that other businesses would benefit from, or they may be harmed from it. I know I've heard from one of the RV parks that they're not too keen on this project. We're also looking at issues with what is it that we want as far as our master plan goes. And do I understand we've had it for quite a while? Yes, and it seems to be working well. So I don't know that this project is going to correct some harm or to bring something that is so beneficial to the city that we can't do without it. But my real concerns about this that I had expressed previously on this project is the intertwining of a public golf course with a private commercial interest. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We also know that things do change. The proposal from this business is to have the property under lease for a century. That does not appear to be within the interest. Madam City Attorney had done some research on other leases that we have outside of the energy transfer area. It is true, we did just approve a long-term lease with the state of Nevada for the Nevada State Railroad Museum. And, you know, there's been back and forth with the Railroad Museum for years about what they already had out there and what they didn't have and all of that. We were talking about a very small piece of land that is in addition to land that the museum already has. The most recent solar project, Townsite Solar, has a 30-year lease with 2 10-year options. And I think it's important to realize the difference between utility scale solar energy projects and tourist-related businesses. We often see problems with tourist-related businesses due to the fluctuations that come from time to time with the economy. If the economy goes down, people stay home. They simply don't have the money to go out. When we continually hear that Boulder City functions as a tourist business town, that is belied also by the fact that when we look at our top 10 employers in Boulder City, the Bureau of Reclamation has remained #1 for many, many years. The Park Service is another, the hospital, the schools. So, you know, to continually say that this is a tourist town and therefore we're going to always build towards tourism, it simply has never been the case. It certainly is great to have restaurants that we can choose from in the uptown area, When I take a look up there right now, you know, things are going pretty well for them. I also have lived here for a long time, all my life, being a native of Boulder City and having seen times that weren't too great. But I don't know that this project is going to make that much difference, because when the tourist industry falls off, this business is going to likely fall off as well. But my bigger concern is having this intertwined with our public golf course in such a way that would bind that golf course from making changes in the future. When this was originally proposed, it was not proposed to be anywhere near that golf course. And I do understand, you know, especially with our Chamber of Commerce here in Boulder City, you know, simply love seeing the taxpayers invest millions of dollars into projects that private companies then come and utilize to make profit off of. Certainly nothing against a business that finds a way to make a profit, but this unnecessarily restricts that golf course in a way that would be detrimental, potentially detrimental in the future. The proposal of a long-term lease on something like this, you don't see that in commercial properties. You set a lease to allow somebody to get a return on their investment, and then that's it. Then it goes out to bid again and see what would be best for the landlord. In this case, the people of Boulder City would be the landlord. To keep this under lease for a century to a single entity is just bad public policy. And I think that's borne out by the leases that we have elsewhere, that we don't have that. We do have long-term leases with nonprofits and things like that that all come up for regular renewals, but not something like this. Having looked at the recommendations from the Parks and Rec Commission, they also had significant reservations about this project, especially in the case where it is being built right into the existing golf course. I think those are valid considerations. It's noted as well that the Planning Commission did not give the level of approval that's needed for this. And the idea that, well, we'll just move it a little further along in the process, that also is the way that things get done here too often, where it's like, well, we'll just take one more step, and then all of a sudden we've fallen off yet another cliff. So I am not in favor of this. I think planning commissioners and Parks and Rec commissioners, airport personnel, have all made the indication that this is not in the right place and it's not the right choice. And rather than going forward and saying, well, maybe we'll take a look at something later on, this is actually making that designation of land available for a project like this. It's not something that I envision supporting. Councilmember Jorgensen.
Thank you. In looking at the same thing that you were looking at as far as the Park and Rec Commission, they did receive this presentation and the motion was approved 6-0, passing. So they were in favor. They did have questions. I know that when you had come before, I had specifically asked all those questions and had you go through them, which I appreciated because then it helped me to understand the very concerns and questions that they had. Also, I guess my question for you, Michael, would be, is this a 90, 100-year lease? I don't see this anywhere.
That is subject to the negotiations with the city council, and that hasn't started yet.
Okay, so a specific time for the lease has not been put in this?
No, that can't begin until the land use designation is addressed.
Okay, so we're not necessarily talking about that long. We don't have to.
That's up to the city council.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would like to make note, though, that when this proposal was made, it was made with a very long-term 99-year lease. So we can talk about, well, that's up to negotiation, that's up to this and that, but that was the proposal, would be that this is for a very long-term lease. And, you know, whether the Planning Commission, or excuse me, the Parks and Rec Commission eventually did approve this, they did so with assurances that, oh, well, don't worry about your concerns now, those will be addressed later. I think those are the types of things that when those concerns are expressed and they are not resolved, they're only told, well, we'll take a look at that later, we need to be very, very careful about moving forward with that type of justification. Councilmember Bridges, did you have a comment?
No, I had the same question regarding that we are not at this point talking about terms of a lease. We are talking about the master plan land use designation.
That is correct.
Correct, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. I guess where I'm at is I think that, yes, a lot of questions have been asked, and I think that the applicant has been very forthright in trying to address some of them. Again, we are very early in the process to even start to answer some of those questions. It could very well be that we get very far down the line and a lot of work and time has been put into it, and an agreement can't be reached to because those terms are not agreeable, or the residents of Boulder City say this is not an appropriate use of this land. Whether that happens during zoning or when the lease comes before council. I mean, there are going to be plenty of times, and I'm sure that the applicant wouldn't want that to happen. I don't think anybody would want something to move so far along and to not reach an agreeable term. So I would hope that agreeable terms could be reached too. But at the end of the day, this city council can make sure that we are not putting forth something that is absolutely inappropriate. I think that there are times and opportunities in which private and public entities can interact with each other in any way that is of benefit to the entire community. I think this might be one of those. I myself still have a lot of concerns, right? The lease term agreement, right? For the length of that term. 99 years, right, is not something I would probably be okay with. But those are things that can be discussed and worked on down the line. Water usage, they have gone to great lengths to talk with Southern Nevada Water Authority about their water use. But at the end of the day, until we actually have a map and know what is the final thing, that's what is going to determine what is the real water use going to be like, what is the service connections going to look like, how many plots. I mean, all of this is at such a high level right now. I don't think it's inappropriate for us to allow the conversation to go, knowing that council will always have the authority to make sure that this happens, should it move forward with the best interest of the city. And if it doesn't, then it should not move forward at that point. But I don't think we're there yet. As I would say, a number of the people who have raised these questions have fallen short of saying, I don't like this project. In fact, they say, I love this project. I think it's a good idea. I'm just concerned about the area, or I'm concerned about this particular issue. Those answers can't be provided immediately at that spot. There do need to be time so that they can be well thought out and we can get real answers here and not just off the cuff ones. So I guess to that point, I guess at this time I would be okay with moving forward. I do still share a lot of concerns. Open land and Parks and Recreation, which it is now, is a great land use for that area. And a lot of commercial uses for that land would be very and incredibly inappropriate that I would not want to see happen. I don't think this project is one of them, but I also don't know in the end if the residents will find this project appropriate or not. But I don't think we should stop the conversation now.
Thank you. Again, I would just say to that what is being asked tonight is to pass a resolution that says that location is the right location. It's not that we're saying we like this concept and maybe there can be another place for it. It's that this is the location that would be voted on, that this would be the appropriate location for it. And that is what the question is regarding this resolution. So I think we need to be very clear about that rather than saying, well, hey, it's a nice looking project, maybe we'll wait and see what happens. That's what this question is. So I think we need to be very clear about that. Any other questions or comments? Anyone wishing to make a motion on Resolution 7520?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to.
We have a second.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't finish. I needed to explain the finding also. I'm sorry. I would like to move to pass resolution number 7520, consistent with the finding of section 278.220.2 of the NRS.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm opposed. Motion passes 4-1. Mr. Mays, thank you for your time. Brings us to item number 16 for possible action, presentation on a columbarium for pet cremains. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Mr. Jim Keene, our city engineer, will be walking you through some updated options for the pet columbarium.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jim Keene, your city engineer. At the July 12th City Council meeting, staff was asked to do some research into pre-manufactured columbaria. We have done that and prepared a short presentation. Columbaria, the pre-assembled, what we found is there's quite a few manufacturers out there. The one this presentation is based on is called Kickoff Columbaria out of Crookston, Minnesota. There are, like I said, there are many other manufacturers, but these were pretty nice, so I used this one to go by. And they also offer another item called an ossuaria, which I'll explain that as we get into the presentation. The columbaria can be customized to fit any space and specific needs that we have. Prices range from $40,000 to $100,000 depending upon the size. And the city would be responsible for the slab to set that on, and then also the crane to set it once it's here. And the company provides people to help us set that and get it set in place. They come in many different sizes and configurations. The ones shown here are a 96 niche and a 144 niche. Just for reference, the 96 niche is approximately 5 feet tall and about 7 feet wide. And the 144 is about 7.5 feet tall by 7 feet wide as well. This particular company offers niches in size from 60 to 144. And like I said, they come in rectangles, straight and curved walls, half circles, obelisks, interlocking walls. These are only for cremains. This is not a mausoleum, so you're not putting bodies in there, just cremains. Moving on to the ossuarium, and this was something I found kind of particular to this company that we base this on. It's more, you get more spaces in a similar footprint. It's a more of affordable interment option for those who don't require a niche for their pet. It offers a large return on the investment. The one you'll see in the next picture is 425 total urn spaces. There's 100 companion spaces and 225 what they call soft urn spaces. Has a memorial band to capture the names of the pets that are put into the ossuary space. Prices on these start a little bit higher at $47,000. And the same thing, the city would be responsible for the slab and the crane to set the item. So this is what one of those looks like, very similar to the other one, but if you notice, there's a capstone on this one and a base stone. If I go back to the other picture, there's no base stone because there's no opening in the middle that you'll see on the ossuarium. So this is what the ossuarium looks like. It has the niches on the outside and a vault on the inside that additional cremains can be put in their soft urn. Let's see. The ossuarium also comes in many different sizes and configurations, similar to the columbaria, but they have a new one that I didn't get a picture of. They call it an obelisk. It looks like the Washington Monument, similar. It's just a monument style. It comes with less niches, but more ossuary space. So the one they had on their website that they've recently built, this is, like I said, it's something new to them. It had 19 niches on the outside, but it had 800 ossuary spaces on the inside. And those the salesman told me are customizable by height if you want to do something like that. This is kind of how an ossuary operates. There's one niche location up at the top. That's an opening that opens up into the vault space to where you can put the cremains of many animals in, whereas the niches you can put about 2 per niche. As far as the location, staff is recommending that it go at our existing cemetery. The site, it's kind of hard to see on there, but there's a little red dot to the left. That's in a parking area. The site is relatively level, has ample parking, and will provide for ease of the slab construction and placement of the unit. And it will also be away from the turf areas and the spray irrigation. So the thought was if we put it next to the turf and the wind's blowing when we're irrigating the grass, it's going to spray all over the ossuarium or the columbarium. Another reason that we are recommending it go in the existing cemetery is because per NRS 452, cemeteries and crematories for pets, we would have to dedicate at least 2.5 acres as a pet cemetery. Since we already have a cemetery, we thought it would be good to just place it there. Per the NRS, the city would also need to adopt an ordinance for a pet cemetery. We don't currently have one of those. And then also per the NRS, we would be required to set up a trust fund for the endowment care of the pet cemetery that must be started with an initial sum of approximately $25,000. And with that, I'll try and answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Keene. This was a project that I believe had been approved by council in the prior fiscal year budget. I appreciate staff taking the time to look into some options on this. Where this came up is folks who are not aware, there was a pet cemetery out off of US 95 that was in use for many years. Before Boulder City was incorporated, while it was still a federal reserve. I don't know why, but one or more members of staff have referred to that as being illegal. I don't believe there was anything illegal about it because the person who worked on maintaining it was an employee of the Bureau of Reclamation, so I believe that it was done with permission. But the problem is that over time, that area became enclosed or included in the wildlife conservation area. And now, for anyone to go out and bury a pet there, that is illegal. The land can no longer be disturbed, which, you know, in one way, it is that the existing internment of pets out there cannot be disturbed either. So the issue that had come up was people being concerned that those internments, those graves for the pets, would be disturbed with some construction that was being looked at, the water pipeline. Well, that was not going to happen, but a lot of people expressed concerns about, you know, what should we do? So this was the decision of the council that we would look into something like this. The original thought was perhaps out by the animal shelter, but as you pointed out, state law says that if that were to happen, that would have to be into perpetuity, that property would be reserved for a pet cemetery. So as far as the costs are, well, we're well over a year now since this was originally being discussed. So it does look like the cost may be above what had been budgeted, which was $50,000, and of course the location of it has been changed. So any other questions or comments? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, what I remember from my briefing, there was a cost of about $1,500 if we use the traditional, the columbarium thing. Is there a price or a cost that they suggest for the use of the ossuarium?
Actually, the company, they don't actually make these for pets, but they have people asking to use them for pets. So all the information they have on their website is for human cremains, which is, I think they were around $3,500, something like that. But then for the ossuarium part of it, I think they were at like $900.
Okay, I have to explain something. I am not unemotional about this. I mean, certainly over the years we have had to put down several of our pets who have reached their expiration date, so to speak. We've actually had them all cremated around our house, or little wood boxes. I think my concern about this, my biggest concern I don't use this word lightly, is it's a little elitist. It means that a set amount of people over a specific amount of time will be able to spend money to make sure there's a place to put their deceased animals. And yet the city will be paying for it. And it would have to be quite costly to repay the city, so to speak, for this facility. I mean, it's not just the thing, the unit, but it's also the pad, it's the space, it's the maintenance of it. So I think when I thought about a pet cemetery and a nice piece of land that people could use instead of going out in the desert, that this is a whole different concept. I was going to say a whole different animal, but that's not appropriate. But it's a whole different concept than I had, and I'm not sure it really meets that criteria for me of the kind of small-town pet cemetery idea. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes, I remember, because I did ask that question as far as cost to be able to place your animal, because I know that we also just lost our dog, and we had him cremated, and I know there's a cost involved with that, and he also sits at our house. I guess my question is, I know that there was a pet, something similar to this in Vegas, someone said, and there was a charge that they were.
We found one in, over on Craig Road, over in Vegas. It's Craig Road Pet Cemetery and Crematory, and they do have an ossuarium for putting cremains in, and they charge $1,500.
Okay, and it seems.
That is a private one. It's not owned by the city or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, I would have to say, and I know that I did also ask, if you started out with a 96 niche, if you could add to it later if that was a need and make it up to 144, and you said some of those models have that ability.
Some of those, I don't know if the round models that I showed you on the pictures can do that, but you could add another round one if you wanted, if we went with that item. But they have like rectangles, you could stack them next to each other. They have walls that could be interlocking, so you have one wall and then you decide to buy another wall, you could interlock it and have a form of them, things of that nature.
Yeah, I guess I too wonder about the population that this would serve. I love my animal, but I'm not sure that I would place him anywhere but on my shelf. And I know that we still have a lot of desert out there that we can't monitor, and be it illegal or not illegal, that's an option when you don't want to pay $1,500, and it's not the right option. But I could see that $1,500 might be out of the range for quite a few people, even if they love their pets.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
We're talking about prices, but this would be a publicly owned thing, so that price determination would be able to be determined by the city, correct?
That's correct, Councilmember. And just on the pricing, these were this was just research that Jim did related from the company and the other place in Vegas, but really the city council could opt whatever price you'd want to charge for this. You could look at covering the costs, which I just did some back of the napkin math. It looks like it would be about $395 a space if we were covering our cost for the pad and the unit. But you could look at subsidizing it or not. So.
Because the way I look at this is this is a service that we would be providing at this point.
Hi,
Go ahead.
Jamie Carreri, Director of Public Works. I wanted to also add to this that once this one, whichever one we go with or choose to go with, 96 gets full, we have to expand on it. So that expansion now opens up for a larger footprint. So we're going to have to do more footprint. Also, I know that the presentation that Jim did showed a garden, a bench, and all that. So this is also upkeep. We might want to change that if we expand a little bit. So it's not just a preliminary cost. There's an annual cost or continuing cost associated with it. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you. I appreciate the information. Yeah, you know, because I do see this as a service. We, as a city, provide a lot of services that don't necessarily always cover their costs. You know, I think of parks in particular. What is the current, I mean, a lot of the arguments that are being made, I think you could make for a cemetery for humans, for people as well. You know, it is a cost, and is limited space, and it has to be provided. I mean, what we're talking about is providing an option for those who would benefit from having a place to visit rather than those. I know there are many. I worked at an animal hospital where it's a lot for them and to have those remains up on a shelf. Yeah, that's you know, it depends on each person. What is the appropriate way to dispose? It sounds, but you know, the appropriate way to honor and respect, I guess, is a better word. This is a service that we would be providing, and I think we could make sure that the costs are not make it only feasible for the most, you know, elite here in Boulder City. I think we could make it so that it is something that could hopefully be used or provided to a larger portion of the population. And if that means down the line we'll need further of these, it would mean that there is interest in this. And I think that would help us know that this is something that Boulder City should be considering. So to that end, I would think the ossuarium allows more of that potential as opposed to the columbarium, but I guess that's where I am. I would think that we are moving forward to this, thinking of it as a service to the community and not necessarily as a way to generate or cover costs for the project itself.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, I think it's a bit of a red herring when council members have brought up. There had never been a decision made that there would be no cost involved. As a matter of fact, I think the understanding always was that there would be a cost involved. So it's not something free. And again, when we look at what we're spending on many other things, you know, if you choose to have a plot at the cemetery or have a niche at the mausoleum for your own remains, that's going to cost you. I think the cost of plots at the city cemetery, you know, used to be very inexpensive, and now I believe it's something like $8,000, and that.
Something along that lines, I think, once you get all the way through it, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, again, people can make their own choices about how they do this. You know, this is a previously approved project as well, although it may or may not result in more than what was budgeted and approved 2 years ago. You know, certainly it can be said, no, we just won't address this issue at all. But let's not do it on a statement of this being elitist or that the city's going to be footing the bill on this. Because I believe it was always the understanding that there would be a cost to an individual who wants to utilize this method. But I think the reason for doing this initially still stands. What do we expect our residents to do if they choose to bury their pet? And the idea is that we would not have people going into the conservation area that is now illegal. And by the way, that's not the only pet cemetery out there in that area, because people have found other places. That came into play with the most recent solar project. That, you know, fortunately the company there agreed to move a fence a couple of feet, and were able to maintain some other graves that had been placed out there by people. I don't think this is a prohibitive cost. I think that Mr. Keene may find that there are other options besides the ones that you have found that could be less expensive. And yes, they're very serene scenes that you have there with the benches and all of that. You know, that might come in the future, depending on what the response from the residents are. But as I said, I would point out that this has already been budgeted money, and this is just a project that staff was not able to get around to. So there's money that's already out there for this project. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Jorgensen?
So the money that's out there is 50,000, is that what we have? We have that appropriated for that,
Yes.
right? Okay, and I see a total here of up to 100,000. When would that decision be made, and who would be making that decision if it was more around the 50,000 and more around the 100,000?
That would be the council direction that we're looking for, what type of size you'd like to go with. If you want to go with the ossuary, which seems like it would hold more, but that's definitely your decision, and we do have 50,000 budgeted for this, and the CIP is the project, so it will have the added cost of the base, and I believe with some other savings and other projects, we might be able to cover that. But for the actual unit itself, really we have 50.
So what we could do is actually provide options of $50,000 for buying a unit and provide the council different options to possibly select.
I think I would like that, especially considering, because right now it just seems kind of vague, $60,000 vague, for me. And so I kind of would like that. I appreciated Councilman Adams bringing out the idea that it is a service, and I appreciate your explaining that it doesn't have to be 1,500. When I heard that price, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if that's a service that very many people would want to access, but if we have the opportunity to provide a service and do it at a more affordable cost, I could see this being a benefit to the community. I would like to see it more around the price range that we agreed upon for it. So I guess I would like to see what those options are.
There's also another option we discussed earlier was we could put it out and see what the demand is before purchasing. See if we could fill essentially the slots before buying or spending money on it. So to see if the demand is actually out there for it.
Any other questions or comments? Again, I think it needs to be kept in mind too that there would be a charge for this. So the costs that are being tossed around right now would be lower because people would pay for this service. But yes, there may be whatever you want to call it, a startup cost or whatever. I will make a motion to move forward with identifying the cost on this, what a potential price point might be for the use of the service, and to also put something out on social media and see what kind of responses we get from the public. Perhaps we can have some town hall meetings on this and get some feedback from staff as far as what interest might be available. Is that sufficient? Anyone wishing to second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, Mr. Keene.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to item 17, presentation by Mr. City Manager regarding Americans with Disabilities Act.
Good evening, Mayor and council members and the 3 Boulder City residents still in the audience for this item. I'm Taylor Tedder, your city manager, and inclusion and accessibility are 2 very important features for a successful community. And I'd like to share with you a little bit more about our efforts to better comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. So the ADA was signed into law in July 1990, and it's one of our most comprehensive pieces of civil rights legislation. It prohibits discrimination and guarantees that people with disabilities have the same opportunities as everyone else, from employment to purchasing goods and services to participating in government programs and services. To be protected by the ADA, one must have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one of the more major life activities, and the ADA does not specifically name all of the impairments that are covered. Here's a look at some of the projects that the city has overseen as a part of ADA efforts. So we've worked closely over the past decade with the RTC, Regional Transportation Commission, on a number of projects to make it easier for people with visual or mobility impairments to navigate our community. These include the Nevada Way reconstruction, which was in 2012. ADA ramps were upgraded as part of the street reconstruction from Buchanan Boulevard to Wyoming Street. The Utah Street reconstruction, that was in 2017. ADA ramps were also upgraded as part of that reconstruction. Juniper Way and 5th Street reconstruction, also in 2017. The ADA ramps were upgraded as part of that street reconstruction. Boulder City Parkway, the complete street improvements, that was in 2018. All driveways and ADA ramps were upgraded. The Lakeview Park improvements in 2018. The park improvements included ADA access upgrades. On Arizona Street, that was in 2019. All of the ADA ramps were upgraded as part of the reconstruction from Utah to Nevada Way. And the Arizona Street feeder, which this portion was completed in 2020. The ramps were disturbed during reconstruction and upgraded from Nevada Way to Railroad Street. And it should be noted that the city oversees the annual pedestrian and ADA improvement projects. Since 2012, we've been grinding potential trip hazards around town. Staff also identifies and repairs sidewalks around town that may have experienced some panel heaving or things of that nature. And that especially happens when the grinding is not sufficient to resolve the hazard. Work also includes the installation of pedestrian-activated rapid flashing beacons at select crosswalks, which everyone's seen around town. So then moving on to facilities improvements, we've done several things as of late. In 2019, the municipal court experienced an addition put on, and that has access requirements for ADA. The fire station remodel that was completed in 2020 makes it ADA, so any employees or residents going in there would be able to have full access to the facility. City Hall in 2021, we rebuilt the entry hall that used to be in this room for wheelchair access behind the wall to my right, and upgraded the wheelchair ramp here on the north side of the building as well, and took it a step further this July here in the council chamber with the rebuild of the dais with the ADA ramp, which actually, if any council member ever had ADA requirements, they would be able to have access to the dais. And there's more that we need to accomplish. Currently, if someone in a wheelchair has to go from this room down to pay their utility bill, they would have to exit the north door and go all the way around to the south end of City Hall and access the door on the east side of the building on the garden level. So ARPA funds have been earmarked and approved by the City Council for ADA upgrades to this facility specifically, including the potential for building an elevator from this floor down to the garden level. Another thing that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to ADA is web and meeting transparency. So staff is continually working to ensure that our website, bcnv.org, is accessible and usable by people with disabilities. So the website does comply with federal Section 508 requirements, as well as international standards of web content accessibility guidelines, which is critical for people with visual impairments. Since early 2019, BCTV has also been posting meetings on YouTube with the closed captioning. And staff's also currently researching software options that would provide real-time captioning for FY24, and we'd be able to use that for both the live stream and on the Cox Cable channel. Earlier this year, Judge Victor Miller and his staff and the communications team recorded a Know Your Rights video, and that short video explains the court process and Miranda rights, including closed captioning. And last month, with the installation of this new dais and the carpet in the council chamber, we had a hearing loop installed. So individuals wearing hearing aids, while they're in the chamber, they can set their device to hear the meeting directly from our audio feed into their hearing aid, which eliminates any noise. Or you can use this handy little device that we have, and you just wear it on your ear, and it does work and Councilmember Bridges is also trying one out for us tonight to make sure it works properly, and sounds good, yeah. And this was a project that late Councilmember Warren Harhe initiated. So moving on, here are the inclusive playground pieces that we've added to various parks in the past few years. It really ensures access to all ages, incomes, and abilities of our residents. In 2019, we installed the Friendship Swing at Oasis Park, as well as the Rhapsody collection of music instruments at Oasis. And also in 2019, the Omni Spinner at Hemingway Park was installed. Both 2019 and 2020, we had solid safety playground resurfacing at Hemingway, Bicentennial Park, and Veterans Park. And just last year, the Rhapsody chimes and musical instruments were also installed at Bicentennial Park. And this year, with the Xeriscape Park, the playground ramp entrance is also ADA accessible for anyone that wants to use it. I know we had a little bit of discussion about the possible new pool tonight, but we're still using the existing pool, and we want to make sure that that's ADA accessible as well. It is up to date. In August of 2018, we did purchase portable ADA steps for the main pool, and in January of 2019, we replaced the ADA benches in the men's locker room. And also, March of 2019, the city expanded parking for disabled persons in front of the facility, exceeding the ADA standards for that area in front of the pool building, providing 4 spaces instead of the 1 that's required. We are furthering our efforts, continuing to further the efforts for ADA compliance and improvement. So a lot of the sidewalks, there's 2 different standards for sidewalk ramps with the truncated domes. They both meet ADA standards to the standards in the books, but so most of our projects have installed them at an angle, which for some people that doesn't exactly work the best for them, leading them into the center of an intersection. So any project moving forward, we are doing the directional ramps to accommodate for that. We've received some comment and input on that. And so each side of the intersection would have 2 directional ramps. You would be led exactly the way that you want to go. And with that, I am here to stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for putting this item on the agenda. I know it's something that I was talking to you about when we were talking about the RTC funding for ADA improvements. And I had mentioned that this would be, I think, helpful not only for council, but for the public as well. And we, I think, had great input from our public already during comment period. My first question, or I guess it's more of a comment regarding the use of closed captioning on YouTube. I think that's a great service that we have been able to provide, but I would hope that, since that is provided by an outside entity, not that I think Google or YouTube is going anywhere, but we should at least be prepared to know what would we need to do to make sure that we have the capability to provide closed captioning should we need to have to provide that ourselves. To that end, I know the city clerk and I had at some time ago talked about if there was somebody in need of a sign language interpreter, what would we be prepared to have that? I think the question that I would most have is, with the amount of time we have between when a meeting is posted and when the meeting is had, would that be enough time for a resident to say, I would like to have an interpreter present and for the city to be able to respond in a timely manner to provide that service, should it be needed, because we work with such a short window. So I think that's something also that we could look at to help improve. And big thanks to the city clerk for looking into that when we discussed that earlier. But overall, I think it is excellent. A lot of what we are working towards here, I think it's important that we have city facilities that are accessible to everyone and that nobody is being denied access. Whatever we can do to improve that. I guess that would be my first question is, how do we make sure that, it's that we're not just following the letter of the law, but that we truly are allowing for accessibility to these facilities.
Right, so our goal is to exceed what the requirements are. So looking at all of the things that would impact someone with a need. Specifically on the sign language interpreter, in my previous experience with a municipal court, there is actually a service that you can subscribe to for different languages where you can call in and get a specific language to translate for you. And I believe there's also an option for a virtual sign language interpreter that we could look into.
And then as far as, making sure, do we have, when we are reviewing and making sure that this is ADA accessible, do we have somebody who would possibly be the beneficiary of these improvements to be able to say, yes, this is an improvement that would be of benefit, rather than just saying, this looks like this will help, so we're going to make the decision, and then to find out, a year down the line, and somebody goes to actually use it, and they say, well, this doesn't really help me at all. How do we make sure that when in that review process and moving forward, that those who would be the beneficiary of these improvements are being included in the process?
Right, so, we're always welcoming feedback from residents. Our Public Works Department does follow the standards, the ADA standards related to the design of a project, and any consultant that we have we require them to follow those and exceed them. But great point about having someone try it out.
I would certainly encourage you to reach out to the community to see if there aren't those members in the public who would like to participate in that conversation, and something that they could meet with city staff to make sure that those needs are being considered. Other than that, I appreciate all the effort here in moving forward with so many of these efforts. It's very important to our community, especially as was said, we have an aging community. These efforts are well needed, so I appreciate the information.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, okay. I want to know, and maybe this is a question to the city attorney and to you. I have been talking with you and others. I know when Keegan was here, we had that conversation. The best possible structure for a community accessibility advisory committee. This is something that I've been asking about, and maybe it was my responsibility to put it on the agenda as something, but it's something that needs to be looked into. Pam, her husband has specific needs. I know Cindy, and I know what her specific needs are. I would not have known what a truncated dome was unless I knew her. Unless she took Keegan and Taylor and me, and we took a walk. There are people who are deaf. We have people in wheelchairs. We have people on scooters. We have people with all kinds of specific needs. And I don't understand why we don't have, it doesn't have to be a commission with, agendized, that whole thing, but a community accessibility advisory committee that when we're looking at RTC funding for specific projects, are we going above and beyond the basic letter of ADA and actually meeting the needs of our community? When I see those pictures of the motorcycles blocking the sidewalk, when I see a truck delivering products to a company on Nevada Way, and they are blocking the intersection at, I can't remember that, right in front of the Power and Water building. That a person,
Arizona?
Yeah, a person who is deaf, blind, would literally walk into the tailgate. In terms of making sure we have enough parking, handicapped parking, that are we there are these issues that we've been talking about, and I tried to have the little conversations and hoped something would bloom from that. But I think it's important to look at what this could look like and have that presented back, because I think it's not only important, it's necessary. If we're gonna meet the needs of our community, that we have them. If we're looking for a structure, I know that the residents who are sitting there have experience with that kind of structure, with that kind of advisory committee. So I think we've gone past the level of just, you know, let's show each thing to someone, is to actually be able to show some of these bigger projects to folks and say, does this meet our needs? You know, we talked about the wayfaring. I mean, it's wonderful to have those wayfaring signs, but if we're putting 12 items, you know, if we've got suddenly 12 things on that street corner, from the blinking light to street lights to maps to what are those things that keep cars from
Oh, the bollards.
what are they? Bollard, yeah, those things. And garbage can, you know, yeah, because we need to get past the point of basic compliance and actually get to a point where we're into accessibility, and also really making sure that our restaurants and retailers making it so that a resident of Boulder City can walk down the street without bumping into things. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Jorgensen?
Thank you. I really appreciate your bringing this forward. 25 years ago, next month, I entered into the opportunity to understand a little bit more about ADA. My daughter Aubrey has Down syndrome and autism. So there's a lot of different ways that a community can be accessible, right? And we can't understand all the ways unless we talk to the people who are actually experiencing either the ability to access a community or not access a community. And I think that that's why the ADA has been a moving document over time from 1990. I don't think it would be a bad idea to ask some of our residents with specific needs if they could come together and we could ask them these questions, so that we wouldn't just be meeting the letter of the law, we could also meet the spirit of the law at this time. I mean, I just contemplate how would my Aubrey access the Park and Rec Department, right? And I feel blessed in the city of Boulder City that we have not met with any restrictions in that area. They've been welcoming. But with that being said, I think there are other things that others cannot access, including Aubrey, that we could look at and maybe make it different for our residents. So I like the idea of asking those who are actually walking or sitting in those shoes and understanding what their needs are.
Thank you. I also want to appreciate you putting this presentation on. You know, I had referred on an earlier item to the Stantec report. You know, it's unfortunate that a report like that couldn't have given us more insight, but that report just went off the rails and crashed over a cliff, I'm afraid. But we do have some folks in town that may be able to give some input. I know that you have spoken with some folks. We've got projects, 64 of them, I believe, as we discussed earlier tonight. Each one of those needs to have that second look of the engineers that go through all of their paces on it, but that second look to come back and say, okay, you know, we've designed this to the ADA guidelines, but that second look to say, did we miss something perhaps? So again, we've got a lot of projects going. I do think that folks should understand that there has been, just as Mr. Tedder listed all of these projects, there have been a lot of efforts being made over the years here in Boulder City to do these types of things. You referred to the sidewalk grinding, the RTC money that has come in for these different projects. You know, we're dealing with a city that's almost 100 years old, and so it's going to take some time, but thank you for the presentation.
Of course. Thank you.
Don't go back to your seat.
I'll just wait here.
Next item, 18, City Manager's Report.
Tonight we have the claims paid and financial report, and there's nothing of note to bring up this evening unusual in the report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding the City Manager Report? Thank you, Mr. Tedder.
Thank you.
That brings us to our final public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak may do so on any issue at this time. Each person will have up to 5 minutes, and as always, we ask you to be civil and concise. If you would like to speak, please state your name again, please.
I'm Pam Triolo, and the only issue I want to say, it has something to do with the ADA. You can do something in this room that would help people out. If you had a couple chairs with arms, the people that come in with canes and wheelchair or walkers, it would certainly help them to get up and out of the chair. I know with my husband, if I've got a chair with arms, he can get up by himself. If it's a chair without arms, I got to pull him up. So I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see if we have any of those left. If not, we can get some. Anyone else? All right, anyone wishing to call in for the final public comment period may do so at this time. The phone number is 702-589-9629. Again, this is the final public comment period for City Council meeting. Anyone wishing to call in, the phone number is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any emails received for the final public comment?
No comments were received.
Thank you. Hearing no others, we will close the final public comment period then and move to our last item, City Council reports. Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, the only report I have is, as usual, Emergency Aid is able to assist those residents facing an emergency with rent and utilities, and has a very well-stocked pantry. So if you are in need, just call for an appointment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jorgensen?
Nothing to report, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fox?
Yep, I just want to say happy birthday to our city clerk, Tammy, over there, and Thursday is Councilwoman Sherry's birthday. So happy birthday, because I probably won't see you. That's all.
All right. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I had Southern Nevada Water Authority, was not last week, but the week before. It was about as nuts and bolts as you could get as far as the conversations and items went. It was very much contracts and purchasing agreements and all that sort of stuff. course, we've had a wet few months, which helps give us a little bit of reprieve with some of our watering needs. However, still very clear that we are in the middle of well, not even the middle, we're probably in the beginning of a very long, protracted drought, really the aridification of the area. So it's not a reason to use any more water, but one of the silver linings in that discussion was that Boulder City did use 30% less water this month or the previous month over last year's use of water. So that was pleasant to hear, and we got kudos for that. With the Southern Nevada Health District, the Board of Health meeting that I held last week, probably one of the most pertinent discussions that we had was regarding there is a 10-year plan for child behavioral development, essentially mental health for our children in the area. And there was also a discussion about needs for funding, hopefully through Arpa from the member municipalities for the Southern Nevada Health District, as they were not the recipient of funds that they thought that they would or should have been made available to. So I know that it is likely that the health district will be coming forward to the city with some requests and trying to look for ways in which they can better benefit our community, and we can benefit the health district as well. But those were the discussions that were had at that time. Other than that, I have nothing else to report.
Thank you. I'd mentioned earlier this evening about these rescue plan money that the city has already received. The city may be in line for the Inflation Reduction Act funding in some manner. These are going to be good things. I mean, there's a lot of bad economic news out there right now, but some of the requirements, especially in the Inflation Reduction Act, are going to require materials to be manufactured in the USA. That, I think, is a big part of this funding, is to bring some of that back to this country. And we certainly have a lot of projects going out to do that. I've mentioned it since school started up again. Please be careful in the school zones. I still see and hear of people doing things that may not be in the children's best interest out there. So slow down, don't make U-turns, don't pass other vehicles, take care of the kids. And flu and COVID vaccines are now available. We want to make sure we do not see another spike this winter. If you have not made your decisions about it, there's a lot of new, better information out there. Please talk with a a health professional. We need to get this done, and this is the recommended time over the next few weeks to get those vaccinations. Thank you to staff for their work this evening, and we are adjourned.